Guys, I had a bad afternoon.
Did you drop your phone again?
No. Did I tell you, though, that I realized I had dropped... I think I said this on the show. I have dropped my 12 Pro only indoors ever. And I've dropped it in such a way that I noticed I did shatter the back ever so slightly. Like, if you don't look at it, if you don't look at it up close, I don't know. But I've decided unequivocally, this is the last time I will be caseless, caseyless. I just can't do it. It's just, I can't do it. They're too fragile.
Apparently not.
So funny that you mentioned that, actually.
Uh-oh.
No, it's not too bad. But so I've been going caseless this year, first time in a number of years. And the other day, I dropped it. Like, it was, I wish I had some good story, but I don't. And like, I never drop my phone. Like, it's never been a thing. Well, the problem is, almost every year I drop my phone like once or twice. And normally it's in a case. And so I kind of get forgiven. Oh, that was a freebie. And this year, AppleCare is my case. Mm-hmm. Sure enough. So I'm just, walking the dog and like I have like my phone in my hand adjusting something and he pulls right at that moment. And, normally it doesn't happen, but it happened. And I dropped the phone from a height of 3 feet onto a concrete sidewalk. And it's fine in the sense that neither glass pane has broken, but the edges are pretty scuffed up, and they're like rough when you rub your finger over them.
That's undesirable.
Like it's fun. Like it's not bad enough to invoke the AppleCare and get it replaced, but it's just kind of a reminder. Like, oh, I guess that's what cases are for. I wish I didn't need them, and maybe I still don't. If I can have a phone for almost a year and only drop it once and only have a few scratches on the outside that result from that.
You get some sandpaper or a metal file, you can take down those rough edges.
I thought about that, but because I have the red finish. Like if I had just like regular silver aluminum, uncolored finish.
Red magic marker and color it in.
Yeah, well, but
a touch-up pen from a car, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and anywhere that the finish gets scratched, the aluminum shows through. So the red's already gone from those sections, but I would hate to have to make the silver patches larger that are already there.
Yeah. Yep. That's not why my afternoon was bad, but yes, I agree. And I love the look and in many ways the feel of the 12 Pro. And I love the color. Like I liked the foresty green from last year, but this deep blue, I freaking adore. I just absolutely adore it. But I have decided without question that this upcoming next phone for me, I must have a case. And Erin, I didn't get a case for her 12 Pro because they didn't have the light pink case that she's used for years and years and years. They had other not as good colors, and she absolutely shattered her back within a week, like I did last year. And so the List family is no longer allowed to go caseless. But I digress. The reason I'm sad is because I went to pick up my car from Safelite Repair, Safelite Replace, because I had gotten dinged by a rock weekend before last on my windshield, and it was starting to spider, so I was getting it replaced. And the Safelite place happens to be kind of downtown Richmond, and right around the corner from there is my favorite barbecue place in Richmond, a place called ZZQ, which is nationally ranked one of the best barbecue joints in the entire country, et cetera, et cetera. It's a Texas-style brisket and other things. And from everything I've read from people who are born and bred Texas, they say this is one of the only places you can get Texan brisket outside of Texas, right? Well, we go, and remember that the List family is not currently eating indoors. We're not, we're still being fairly paranoid on account of the kids. And ZZQ has a really good back patio. And so the thought was, the kids and Aaron would go to the back patio and I would run through the line, grab the food, and we would go to the back and eat in the back patio outside. And I'm pulling up to ZZQ, which is this very, very small parking lot. And I'm thinking to myself, oh gosh, this is going to be a mess. You know what? Because Aaron had to drop me off so we could pick up my car. So we're in two cars. So I send Aaron a text using Siri. You take whatever spot you can find in the lot. I'll go parallel park elsewhere. And I come up to the parking lot and it's empty. I think, oh, this is fantastic. It was early even for the List family. And we eat early as it is, but it was 5 o'clock, which even for us is early. And so I pull into the parking lot, and there's one or two other cars. I'm thinking, oh, this is magnificent. The back patio is going to be empty. We'll be able to waltz right through the line. This is great. And we finally get up to the door after unloading the kids. Sold out. We'll see you tomorrow. Do you guys have barbecue places that will just sell out? It was devastating. I was so sad.
I thought you were going to say that it was closed down, that it wasn't there anymore.
No. Thank goodness.
Oh, that happened to mine.
Oh, wait, the one in Westchester, or the one near
it's gone. Although I heard
oh, that's really too bad.
It didn't survive COVID at all. They didn't even as soon as COVID started, they were gone. But I heard that it's being picked up by another barbecue place, but I haven't been back to in town to see it yet.
Oh man, that's a real bummer. I really wanted to. I mean, I don't have any plans to come up near you again anytime soon, with respect. But I was assuming at some point I would be up in the Westchester area, and I would, I was hoping that you could take me and we could go get some of your barbecue and see how it is.
I mean, in all fairness, it's probably better for my health not to have massive quantities of meat covered in wood carcinogens every week. It's probably best ultimately that I'm not having super easy access to it. But it does that was a very good time that I kind of miss.
It makes me sad. But anyway, so if that's the most of my problems, I'd say I'm doing all right. But it did make me sad that I couldn't get my delicious and hilariously expensive barbecue after picking up my car. Interestingly, I couldn't have them just do it in the driveway because I guess with these new fancy schmancy cars these days, they need to do recalibration of all the sensors that are behind the windshield. So I'm assuming that's why they insisted that I bring it down to their location, and they took it for 3 hours and did their thing.
You never want them to do it in the driveway. Come on.
I mean,
why not? Get your car painted in a tent? Because it's not a controlled environment.
Okay.
You want it to be indoors, first of all, so there's not pollen and dust and bugs and wind and rain and who knows what else. And yeah, you want it to be someplace with controlled lighting on a level surface with technicians who are in a comfortable place, not just randomly guerrilla in a parking lot. I always dislike that.
Oh, my word.
Okay.
Good to know. See, but the advantage of John never buying cars ever and buying unremarkable cars when he does is that you don't have radar cruise control, do you? You don't have any of
My car is remarkable, Casey, first of all. And second of all, no, I don't have radar cruise control. But I've also, I guess I drive between the rocks. I haven't lost a windshield that I can recall either.
Yeah. This is also my opportunity to remind you, those of us who live in places with snow, which, John, includes me sometimes, those of us who live in places with snow, please clean off the roof of your car when it snows. Because once, going back to Mom and Dad's when they lived in Connecticut, I was on the Jersey Turnpike, and some lazy turd in front of me in a Lexus sedan didn't clear all the snow and ice off of the roof of his car, and then a lot of it hurtled into my windshield and absolutely shattered the windshield of the Subaru to the point that I probably shouldn't have continued to drive it. But I was so close to Mom and Dad's at that point, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to get home. So please, if you live in a place with winter, don't be a jerk. Clear off the roof of your car. Please clear the roof of your car. I don't care how tall your car is. If your car is that tall, either get a more reasonable car or get a ladder, but clear off the roof of your car for the love. Please.
I love
Please
your
do it
solution.
for me.
Get a ladder.
And this is a good defensive driving lesson. If you're driving behind a car that has snow on the roof, change lanes. If you're driving anywhere near a truck, get far out of the lane, away from it, in front of it, ideally, or several lanes to the side as you pass it. And if you have an iPhone, put it in a case so when you drop it, it doesn't break.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
But it makes it so much bigger. I'm loving the mini lifestyle so much this year.
My case is so slim. I just put a link to my case. Honestly, someone, we had a friend's visit, and they had a phone. I'm like, oh, how are you liking the big iPhone? Because I thought they had a 12 Pro. And they said, I don't have the big iPhone. I said, yeah, you have the big, or the Pro Max or whatever. You got the big Max one, right? And they said, no. So I grabbed their phone, and then I took out my phone and held them up to each other. And lo and behold, we had the same size phone, but their case was huge. It just made the phone seem so much bigger. My very, very thin, extremely cheap leather case, which so far turned out to be a great purchase because it's holding up great. It's protecting my phone, and it makes the phone barely bigger than it is. So it's so slim that I thought someone else's phone was the bigger size up just because the case was so chunky.
But see, the current generation of the medium-sized Pros, I really don't like the way they feel. I don't like the polished steel bands and I don't know. They're, first of all, they're massive fingerprint magnets. I think they look terrible.
You put a case on it so you don't have to worry about the steel band anymore.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess that is the size phone I had for the last few years before this one, and I lived with it, but I love the Mini so much, except the battery life does suck, and I do miss a 2x camera. But other than those things, I do like it a lot. There's never a time when I'm using my Mini and I think my phone is too small. Literally never. I never think that at all. And every time I handle like TIFF's Max, like, what is this? Like, it's an iPad.
Yeah, that is effectively an iPad. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, but like, I know there's a middle setting that most people pick. There's a reason why, but still, like, the Mini feels so good, even though it has those flaws. Like, yeah, the battery life is not good, and especially now that it's not brand new. You know, it's almost a year old now. So the battery capacity is a little bit less, and I'm using it a little bit more because it's summer and I'm walking around a lot. But it is still such a great size that I'm willing to tolerate the mediocre battery life, and the 2x lens. I do miss that. I would love to have that back, but I love the way this phone feels so much that I'm willing to give that up. But yeah, we'll see this fall. Like, the current rumors are that it's going to be the same sizes and probably roughly the same trade-offs. And if that's the case, I might go back to the middle size. I don't know yet, but I won't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. You tell him.
This is like the worst, like, most privileged thing, but still.
Yep.
Like, I want my 2x lens back, but man, I really like the size.
If the Mini had all 3 lenses, which I'm sure would have looked preposterous, I'm sure it's physically difficult to fit it all. Like, I understand why it doesn't, but my goodness, if it had all the standard issue camera setup, I probably would have gotten one this past year. But I am personally unwilling to give up anything in term. Well, I shouldn't say anything. I'm unwilling to give up one of the 3 available lenses because I feel like I do flip between all 3 quite a bit. And I know we did research about this when this was an issue, a year ago almost. But whether or not the facts bore it out, I feel like I use all 3 of the lenses enough that I would not sacrifice and get a Mini. And now, because Apple made this compromise device, not unlike the MacBook that I loved so much, nobody's buying them. Who'd have thunk it? And so now the rumors are, well, there's not going to be more of them, possibly ever, because nobody's buying them.
Well, and one theory I heard that I think makes a lot of sense is that this past year, anybody who bought a new iPhone this year probably did not do so by first handling them in stores, because you couldn't.
That's true.
And so, and like the Mini, you kind of have to feel it to get that kind of like, ooh, I want this kind of feeling, because it's, most people, the idea of going super small sounds risky, or they might think that's not what they want. But once you handle it, that's when you realize, like, whatever the benefits of it are, and whether that does something for you. Like, that's you know it when you feel it, right? And so in a year when most people never went into the stores, if picking out a phone this year, it does make sense why a lot of people would not have gone for it. Whereas current rumor again is that they're going to stick with the same 3 sizes for the next year, and I think that we might see a different sales breakdown in the next year. That being said, I don't think it's going to take off like wildfire. I still don't think it's going to be the most popular phone, and it's probably going to be a somewhat distant third like it is now across the 3 sizes. But it's still really nice, and they still sell a ton of them in absolute terms. It's not a big percentage, but they still are selling a ton of them, and so I do hope this size continues and continues to improve over time. But even I, after a year, I'm kind of thinking maybe I should go back this fall to the middle size just to get that 2x lens and the extra battery life back. But I don't know. We'll see. We are sponsored this week by Hover. When I want to start a new business, the first thing I do is I try to get a good name for it. And the first thing I do when I try to get a good name is look at domain names. I do all that at Hover. Hover is a jumping off point for a ton of entrepreneurs. They want you to start your business, like I do, with a domain name. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from when building your brand online. So no matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. They also have excellent tech support if you have any questions or you run into any issues. And their support team does not try to upsell you. They only work hard to get you online. They have free Whois privacy protection, a super clean, nice UI and control panel, and they have monthly sales on popular top-level domains. So it's hard not to see why Hover is such a popular choice for people starting all kinds of businesses. They really are great. I use them myself for most of my domains now, and they're just wonderful. I've used a lot of domain registrars in the past, and they range from ugly and nerdy to scammy, and Hover is none of those things. It's a really nice business. It treats you well. It respects you, and everything is nice and easy to use. They have great support when you need it. I've used it myself a couple times. Like, I've used the support a couple times. It's just wonderful. See for yourself. It's so nice at Hover to register your domain names there. Grab your next domain name and many more at hover.com/ATP. You can get a 10% discount with that link on all new purchases. Once again, hover.com/ATP. Make a name for yourself with Hover.
Robert Spivak writes, as a designer/installer of smart home systems, I think I can contribute a few thoughts and some insight about what was mentioned about being without being self-promotional or a hidden agenda. Robert writes, I can't prove it, but I swear the problems with Apple HomeKit Wi-Fi devices is rooted in Apple's problems with Bonjour and multicast DNS. HomeKit is totally reliant on MDNS, which Apple uses, but almost nothing else does. Robert apparently has tested 15 different smart plugs from all kinds of manufacturers, and they've all had the symptom of mysteriously dropping off HomeKit Wi-Fi networks. Some in a few hours, some in a few days, some after a few months. But the common symptom is that they still have an IP address and can be pinged. But in any MDNS lookup app, like the free Discovery apps for iOS, macOS, etc., they have dropped out of the MDNS section. Anecdotally, after swapping a lot of Wi-Fi gear and finally methodically upgrading and downgrading firmware and various access points and Wi-Fi routers, it appears that MDNS support is simply buggy or poorly implemented. When a stable combination of software firmware is found, the devices don't drop off anymore. I'm not sure I buy this, but I certainly have a lot less experience than Robert does.
Yeah, I think so. This was in response to last week, how I was basically expressing my woes in trying to get smart home devices that were actually reliable, and in particular, like a smart outlet behind an ice maker that's built in that's kind of hard to access. And I had said, like, I've never found anything like smart home wise that worked 100% of the time, or that didn't occasionally require you to like go repair it with things or whatever. And a couple of pieces of follow-up. Number one, I had forgotten that I have a Lutron cassette set up in my house. when they put in my front lights, like to meet some kind of safety building code, they had to be on some kind of timer so they would always automatically turn on at night. They did that with a Lutron cassette setup. And so I actually have that, and I never think about it because it always just works. And there's switches on the wall also to control the lights. So like I kind of forgot that's there. So that's a good sign that maybe that's something I should look into. And I heard from a bunch of other people that Lutron is worth looking into, whether it's the cassette or the higher end Radio Raw stuff. So I ordered the Lutron outlet. They have one that's made for outdoor use that looks like it'll probably fit back there. So I have that on order. I will report back to let you know how that goes. But that's part one. And part two is, and I think I probably agree with this feedback. Anecdotally, it does seem like Wi-Fi is the problem. Whether it's like the actual radio layer or the association with the SSID, or whether it's IP mapping or DHCP problem, who knows what. But it does seem like Wi-Fi is the common thread here of like, if you avoid Wi-Fi and you go with something that uses its own radio stuff, the Zigbee or whatever, all that stuff, including Lutron stuff, anything that basically has to have some kind of little like radio base to make its own mesh network or whatever. It seems like people have better experiences with that stuff than anything that connects directly to Wi-Fi itself. If that's the case, apparently the new chip or Matter stuff heavily uses Thread as the radio protocol between devices when possible. And I think Thread is one of those things. That being said, I don't know anything about Thread yet, but it does seem like the industry also realized that Wi-Fi was a pretty big part of the problem. And so if we can get more reliable stuff that uses like Thread or other radio technologies that can somehow work together and not have like a closet full of hubs, then great. If that works, great. But in the meantime, I'm going to try the Lutron stuff and see if that works and report back.
It's kind of weird that the computer-spawned stuff, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, end up not being reliable enough for sort of utilitarian purposes, whereas in both cases, the less computery, like the dedicated radio stuff for the home things, or the dedicated little USB RF dongles for Logitech mice, at least in my experience, is much more reliable than Bluetooth. Like sort of not purpose built, because they're all kind of doing the same job, but the ones that, the Logitech thing is not built to be a general purpose wireless networking protocol. It's made for mice and keyboards. So they can really concentrate on that one use case. And in my experience, they nail it. The range is amazing. The reliability is great. I think it's way better than any Bluetooth I've ever used. And then in the home stuff, what's wrong with Wi-Fi? All our other devices are on Wi-Fi. Everything's fine. But if you think about it, like Wi-Fi is something that even when it's in a house and it's very reliable, we're used to the idea that a device could fall off of Wi-Fi and then have to get back on it, right? This is something that happens, right? Even if just your device is restarted, like it goes off of Wi-Fi, then it gets back on and it reconnects. And if you get a new device, you have to tell it about your network and your password and the right SSID. And there's all those sort of steps that involve getting on your network. If someone comes and visits your house, which network should they go on? What's the password? All this other stuff, the different security levels. Oh, this device supports 5 gigahertz. This one supports 2.4. Like a Wi-Fi network is flexible and supports all our devices, but everything I've just described, I think anyone who's had Wi-Fi for a long time has experienced the sort of busy work, management, maintenance of a Wi-Fi network. And no one wants to have any kind of management or maintenance of their light switches. Like you just don't want to literally ever have to do anything, or for that matter, their thermostat, right? Or anything like that. Like when you're talking about your Nest thermostat and how you dislike it and everything, I was thinking about my thermostat, which I don't know if it was here when we moved in or if we got it when we replaced the furnace in the basement. But either way, I've literally never thought about it. I don't think I've ever even changed the batteries. And I think it just takes like a AA, like one AA battery, right? Like just there is a zero tolerance for any kind of maintenance work. And Wi-Fi just isn't like that. As great as it is, like I think, I don't really think about my Wi-Fi, but we just had some friends over and I had to tell them which SSID to connect to and what the password was, right? And when I do get new devices, like even just the new Apple TV, I got to, it would ask me which network to connect to, or if it doesn't grab the network info from something else, or whenever I get a new TiVo, when I used to get those back in the day, there is some amount of futzing to do. But with appliance stuff, you just want it to always work. So I don't know how this is going to sort itself out, but the depressing history of Bluetooth does not make me optimistic about the idea of any of these computer technologies ever getting to the point where they're as reliable as the dedicated ones. So I also don't know anything about Thread, but I really hope Thread is a more purpose-built networking protocol that concentrates on a smart home use case and doesn't care about, computer stuff.
Well, I think also part of it is like the computer standards, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, they are massively more complicated and always changing. Like when Wi-Fi was first coming around and, around 2000, 2010, in that range, when it was first getting, ubiquitous, it was a lot more primitive than it is now. And it's also a lot simpler than it is now. Think about, as you mentioned 2.4 gigahertz versus 5 gigahertz support. The way that's implemented at the Wi-Fi layer is everything broadcast to SSIDs, one for each one, and devices have to figure that out, and they don't always do that right. Now we have, in common usage, multi-point Wi-Fi networks where you're broadcasting from multiple SSIDs, from multiple, little routers or boosters around your house. And so you have to, devices have to manage that and, not see them as 19 separate SSIDs and be able to roam if it's a portable device between them. And everything is so much more complicated now than when Wi-Fi was first designed and was first supported. So it's kind of no wonder that some kind of $4 Wi-Fi chip in a smart home outlet that has to sell for $10 to be competitive might be kind of crappy at dealing with that in practice, or might be a little bit buggy or a little bit off, or just not quite very good or reliable at that. And so something like Thread, if you think about the needs of a smart home networking solution versus anything else, it's so different than computer-based things that are mainly focused on things like data transfer rates and stuff like that. Like smart home stuff needs to be almost no bandwidth. You need very little data transfer, except maybe cameras. But otherwise, most stuff, you don't need very much bandwidth. And what you do need is reliability, range, and enough security to keep people out who wouldn't be authorized, but not so much security that you're transmitting state secrets, within your house to tell your light switch that it's on or not. So the needs are just so totally different, and it makes sense why, in practice, the actual hardware that you can get for smart home devices might be universally 80% good, but impossible to make 100% good, without charging enough that nobody would buy it.
Yeah, all I want to say is that Lutron Caseta, in my limited experience, it's only lasted a couple months, but it is excellent. It's basically bulletproof, and it, generally speaking, you can have a physical switch as well as, control via your phone or HomeKit or what have you, which to me, I think, and we've brought this video up several times, but a friend of the show, Quinn, I think nailed it on the head. You want physical controls in addition to shouting into the air. When you have one or the other, it's really not the best. But when you can hit a freaking button in order to turn the lights on and off, you want to have that as a backup always, no matter what. So moving right along, with regard to HSTS, which may or may not be a list, Jacob writes, I don't think Safari's automatic HTTPS upgrade has much to do with HSTS because Safari has supported that header in the preload list for several years. My guess is that it works similar to DuckDuckGo's smarter encryption. We'll put a link in the show notes. And here's a quote. At the center of DuckDuckGo Smarter Encryption is a large list of websites that we know have encrypted or HTTPS versions of their websites, which we use to ensure that you can only interact with that you only interact with these encrypted versions. We automatically generate this list by continually crawling the web.
Yeah, still no news from Apple over which one of those things it is, but yeah, having a list that Apple maintains in addition to supporting HSTS sounds plausible.
Moving right along, Scott Sutton writes, I just can't wait until Apple allows the web page to change the color of my physical iMac. It's just so jarring to be looking at that web page and see that non-color coordinated keyboard hovering at the edge of my vision.
I put this in here because it was a funny joke, but honestly, first of all, people with PCs probably already do this with all their RGB stuff, right? It's not too far to think that people are certainly changing the color of their keyboard based on the game they're playing or whatever. Changing the color of your computer based on where you're going is definitely a thing that I can imagine Apple doing someday, especially as the technology, becomes possible and, maybe less tacky. But it's trying to, slam the new Safari UI where they're changing the Safari Chrome to match the website in some sort of, I think, mostly misguided attempt to make the website bleed into the application you're using to render it. And I'm not sure how much value there is in that. If you like the way it looks, maybe, but there's so much variability. I really don't want to give web pages that much control over my UI. I think we talked about this in the past couple of weeks. So just it's a matter of degree. When Apple allows you to allow your desktop background to tint your windows or to show through your menu bar, right? Or allow the time of day to influence whether your computer is light mode or dark mode. I would say even the light mode, dark mode things, these are in general more subtle, in terms of how much influence does content you don't control have over your interface. For the light and dark mode, you would say that's not subtle. That's a total flipping of the UI. But it's just two things. There's light mode and dark mode that Apple and presumably app developers have tailored to look okay. The light mode looks okay and the dark mode looks okay. It's not arbitrary control over your user interface by random people's web pages or even random people's individual apps. And even the desktop background, which of course you control, it just subtly hints the color of things and shows through the menu bar a little bit. I would say the menu bar goes a little bit too far, right? But Safari 15 is along that spectrum. It's just way over at the other edge where you're really giving, almost total arbitrary control of what color the UI is. And then Safari mightily tries to lay out all of its text and controls on top of whatever color was dictated by the web page, because they do want to make the web page, like the background, blend into the UI. So you can't have the UI just be influenced by green. It has to literally be the same green for this effect they're going for. And I just don't think it's a great idea. Again, you can turn off all these features. You can turn off the window tinting. I think you can't turn off the menu bar, which really annoys me, although there's that boring old menu bar app that you can use to hack around it. You don't need to use dark mode if you don't want to. Right, you can turn off this feature in Safari, but these are what we're talking about are the defaults. I'm pretty sure window tinting is the default. This is the problem with always upgrading your Mac. I don't actually know what the defaults are anymore because I don't do Mac OS X reviews, but I think window tinting might be the default. It seems like so far the Safari thing that we're complaining about is the default. But yeah, along this, not too much farther along this spectrum is changing the physical color of your computer if it was possible, because hey, why not? For the same reason that you have a color-coordinated desktop background and keyboard and trackpad, it looks nice. I can imagine if you had all those peripherals be chameleon-like, the exact same philosophy that says if the website is green, Safari's Chrome should be green, should also make your entire Mac green. Like it's along that path just a little bit farther down, and not that much farther down. I probably wouldn't be in favor of it.
What about those TVs that have like the edge LEDs that can change color based on the content that's being shown on the TV screen?
Yep.
Hey, I like those. Those prove to be a great idea. Why doesn't Apple just do that? Just have every web page, and of course, as you scroll, it would scroll with it. The whole thing would animate your whole wall. Why not just get the entire computer out of the way?
Yeah, like theming is a thing. Like I remember doing this in the classic macOS days of like picking a kaleidoscope theme and a desktop background and an icon set that has a look, whether that look is kind of a dark mode or like everything is lime green or the teal and the iMac, the bluish iMac days, right? There is something to that aesthetic. I don't begrudge people theming, and I think all the colored iMacs are a great idea. It's the connection between something you don't control, like a web page, and your stuff. Like if it feels like someone reaching across the internet and changing like the lighting in your room or the color of your rug, and that connection is the problem. The problem is not having a theme or having all your peripherals match. I think all that is great. I just feel like it needs to be under the user's control more than allowing, again, arbitrary web pages, which is the biggest canvas of the world to invade your computing environment and screw with it. Like, because you control your desktop background, right? And you can turn all these features on and off, I suppose. But I just think that connection is not the best strategy. We'll see. We'll see if Apple sticks to it in terms of the defaults.
Do either of you have the beta on your phones yet?
I have the beta on a non-carry phone, and which I've only used very briefly, to be honest with you. But my initial impressions were that I like Safari on the phone. I also have it on my not carry iPad, but my day-to-day iPad, and I actually don't mind the color. It is jarring, but I don't mind it. I think I would get used to it. However, I would like to echo the entirety of the internet who has been saying that the tabs are garbage, because they are straight garbage on iPad. On iPhone, I'm fine with it. On iPad, no good. And I haven't run the Mac beta yet, but I have a feeling I would feel the exact same way as the iPad.
So when you put it on your carry phone, whenever that happens, let's revisit how much you like Safari on the phone.
And that's fair. That's fair. Again, I really haven't used it very much. It was a few minutes here and there, and the initial impressions were very, very good. But I will be the first to tell you that you might be exactly right, that if I put it on a phone that I'm using more than a few minutes a day, it might drive me absolutely bananas. You know
what's the worst thing about it to me? Now that I know I've complained about it a lot, but just like a few new observations. This is the new Safari on the phone. First of all, it seems like the touch targets are smaller now for like certain toolbar elements for all over the OS, but especially in Safari, like the touch zone for that ... menu, like I feel like I'm missing it sometimes, and a lot of the other controls, like since they spaced it more away from edges of things or like bars, it seems like you actually have less vertical space on some of the controls. So I keep just missing the controls, and then also, because it does this ridiculous thing where it has the bar on the bottom and then you tap it and then it zooms up to the top so that you can edit the text, the location that you have to tap to edit the text moves around the screen all the time. And I'm finding it's breaking muscle memory constantly because I keep like tapping up top to edit the URL or to do something on the page before the bar is there or something. And I realize, oh, it's at the bottom. I gotta go to the bottom, tap. Oh, now it's zoomed up to the top. Woo! And you gotta like go find it. And like I'm finding it's breaking tons of muscle memory because Safari on iPhone, it has worked similarly for so long. Like in the way it was before this, it was mostly unchanged for so long that there's tons of like just automatic muscle memory from being an iPhone user that you don't necessarily realize will be destroyed when making a radically new UI like this. But that to me is the biggest point of friction, is that I don't know where to tap and I don't know where to look for a certain control for longer now. I have to like refigure it all out. And I've had it on my main phone now for about a week, and I'm still not used to it. Like I still think it's terrible, but I'm thinking like, hey, maybe as I use it more, maybe I'll get used to it. Nope, a week in, hasn't happened yet. I'll keep you posted, but I'm finding it incredibly cumbersome. and even simple stuff like having to do 2 taps for a reload. One of the most common things I do in Safari is I check pages on my servers that show me statuses of things or show me things I have to go through, like new ad buys I gotta have to approve or something like that. And my workflow for those pages is I go to those tabs and I hit refresh to see what's new. And so I realize now, like, how often I need to hit refresh in Safari on mobile. It turns out it's a lot more than I would have guessed if you would have just asked me a few months ago. And I have to just redo those pages to reload themselves with JavaScript or something. Because
you're not using pull to refresh on those pages?
Does that work?
We talked about it on the show.
Yeah. Hang on. Oh, I mean,
if you're at the top of the page, right?
So I just hit the tab square button to pull up my list of tabs. And wait, where the hell am I? Did I break it? No, I broke it. I can't get to my list of tabs anymore. Now it just brings up a new page. Anyway, somehow when I can get back to my list of tabs, I like scrolled up. Now I guess there's some kind of gesture where a side swipe on your tab, I guess, closes it. So I scrolled up a little bit off and accidentally closed a tab, and I don't know which one it is, and I can't get it back. So great. This is a lot of fun. I love Safari.
Just shake your phone. Shake to undo.
Let me see. Shaking.
That's always my desperation is like, I only have one move left, and it's to shake my phone and hope desperately that whoever made this app is stuck in like 2009 and made shake to undo work to restore a tab.
Yeah, shake to undo didn't work, first of all. And yeah, I always, whenever I have to shake my phone to undo, I kind of like do it under the table. Like I look around like I don't want anybody to see me doing this.
You can do. There's a gesture for it now too, right? Isn't it like three finger double tap or something? Chat room will have it in a second.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's some gesture. For
oh
it
yeah,
as well.
Yeah. Because like I always feel like I look like such a fool doing this.
It's satisfying though. You're punishing the phone for making a mistake. Bad phone. Bring that text back.
Yeah. Anyway, so if my Safari ever works again, I'll keep you posted. But I literally can't do anything now. It's totally broken.
So I just installed the Safari Technology Preview on my iMac at the suggestion of somebody in the chat who has already scrolled off the screen. So I apologize. This fucking sucks. I hate this shit.
The Safari Technology Preview, I think, is slightly different than actual Monterey in a few areas, but in general, yeah, that's the UI. I have it installed as well. The good thing about Safari Technology Preview is that you can run it alongside regular Safari, and they have separate worlds of everything, as far as I can tell. At least they have separate state, because when I was trying to test like reload button stuff or whatever, every time I would quit and relaunch Safari, I have it configured to restore all of my windows. And that's just too many damn windows to be closing and opening. But Safari Technology Preview, I just had one window, and so quit, launch. Yeah, if that's for everyone, we should put a link in the show notes. If you want to try out the new terrible Safari on your Mac, but don't want to try Monterey, which I think is the wise thing to do, Safari Technology Preview, they will run on your whatever the hell OS we're on now. I was going to say Catalina, but that's not right, is it?
Big Sur.
Big Sur. Yeah, sorry. I think, I'm not sure how far back it'll run, but anyway, I'm running it on Big Sur. Check out Purple Safari. It's cool.
Is it?
I mean, Purple Safari is cool. This
Normally.
new UI, yeah. this new UI is not cool.
Oh, I hope they don't ship this. I'm getting scared. They're going to.
Yeah.
At least Gruber complained in large, organized fashion. So like they tend to listen to him pretty well, especially with Safari UI stuff. So hopefully, maybe like it's getting to the right ears or eyes, but
I still think that every change I see is like all it needs is some minor tweaks to address the biggest complaints, and it'll be great, right, everybody? Like we already put the preference in for you to turn off the window tinting, so no one can complain about that. Which I agree with them. Like you put a pref in the GUI to turn it off. Good, thumbs up. That's good. But the tabs, no preference is getting rid of those, right? And these minor tweaks are like, here's a reload button. Now the share button can be in the toolbar. Everything's fixed now, right? It's like, no, you're not getting it. The whole, it's like if someone shows you something.
They're the rubber gaskets of Safari UI problems.
Yeah, it's like someone shows you something to critique or something, and they're expecting you to give them like, well, maybe change this small thing or that small thing. And what you really want to say is start over. Like nothing about this is good. Your fundamental idea is bad.
We've added a protective membrane under the keys.
Yeah, it's similar to that, but it's the UI version. Like to their credit, like I understand what they're going for, and there is a measurable benefit in terms of vertical screen real estate. But it's just like I don't think I've seen a single review that has not said the same exact thing, which is like, here are the benefits, here are the drawbacks, they're out of balance, right? Like people aren't being mean to it, just be like, oh, you're bad and this is bad and you should never try anything.
It's like, new. Oh my God, it's new.
Like you tried it. Yeah. And there is some part of that. Because here's what I think. I think if we get stuck with this UI, we will eventually begrudgingly become accustomed to it. And there is a little bit of that. I'm trying a new thing and it's different. Mark mentioned the muscle memory for the phone version. The Mac version is all weird, but I feel like we've had enough time with it now and enough people have really just sat down and analyzed and said, it's not all awful, but the trade-offs don't work, right? We get benefit and then we have drawbacks and the drawbacks are just so much bigger. And that's a sign of a unsuccessful experiment, I think. So I really hope they try something different eventually. But I totally feel like they're going to ship this.
Well, and I feel like I think one of my favorite parts of Gruber's critique of the Safari design is this actually better, or did they just redesign it to just be different? And I get that feeling with a lot of modern Apple redesign stuff that, sometimes it is better, but it seems like the design team wants to move forward, whatever that means, so badly that they want to redesign stuff like on a certain interval, even if A, it doesn't necessarily need it, and or B, what they come up with might not necessarily actually be better. It might just be different. Like, I feel like, designers, programmers, we're the same way. We don't like the old, and we always try to like justify rewriting something we've done before because we want to do it in a new, cool way using some new API or new programming technique or whatever. And designers, I think have a similar problem of like they want to do something new because they get tired of the old, and it's always fun to redesign something and try to really radically change it. And what if we totally rethought, XYZ boring thing that we haven't touched in a while? It's very appealing. I get the appeal to do that, but so often, just as programmers, oftentimes when we rewrite things or refactor things, oftentimes we make them worse, or we forget to fix all the bugs that we forgot over the last 10 years in the new version, and so the new version actually ends up being buggier and possibly not worth it to the customer or the company. I feel like redesigns have similar problems, where like there's this push and you want to redesign this as the designer, and you think, I'm going to make my mark on this project or on this product. I'm going to really, rethink the way browsers look or whatever. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that gives you really great results, but not every time. It's very important for an organization to be able to tell the difference and to catch things like this before they ship, if it's not actually better. And in this case, it hasn't shipped yet, technically. Like, these are still betas. But I hope that Apple gets it right in their decision-making here, that like these redesigns of Safari, while they are different and while they have some good ideas, both the desktop and iPhone versions fail in pretty big ways as designs. And I don't think they're better. And I don't know anyone who doesn't work at Apple. Like, even people who work there, I think many of them don't think so either. Like, I don't know how you could put this out there and see the reaction that the world has given and think, all right, we're good, let's ship it in the fall. So I hope they're hearing us at deeper levels than just, we'll add a reload button and it's fixed, right?
Finally, this has been hanging out in the follow-up section for, I feel like 2 months or something like that, even though it's probably less than that. So Daniel Yount writes, hey, what's going on here? And there's a video of the login screen, and apparently Daniel's avatar for his Mac is his Memoji, and the eyeballs on his Memoji are following his mouse cursor, like Super Mario style in Super Mario World.
Oh, like from the title screen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This has been here. It's X eyes, guys, or the eyes in the menu bar on the Mac. But X eyes probably predates it. Anyway, this was in here for so long just because I initially couldn't tell, is this just a joke video of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if they added this feature? And then once I got Monterey on a Mac, every time I was on it, I mostly forgot to do this. But I was like, how do you set your Memoji as your avatar? I didn't quite know how to do it. Or I just thought of it when I wasn't on that computer and it was rebooted into, Big Sur or something like that. But finally, I saw someone discussing online how to set your avatar to your Memoji in Monterey. So once I saw that, I'm like, this must be real then. because you can apparently use your Memoji as your avatar. And then once you do that, it seems plausible that on the login screen, if you move the cursor around, the eyes of your little 3D Memoji will follow your cursor. That is a cool feature, even though I think Memoji we've talked about this before, are a great example of Apple's corporate aesthetic taking precedence over the literal size, shape, and look of people's faces. Because Memoji are standardized in a way that human beings are not, and Apple essentially doesn't let you make a Memoji that actually looks like yourself if you happen to not have the skull shape that Apple has decided is the appropriate skull shape for humans, as compared to Nintendo with their Miis, where you can absolutely make any grotesquerie that matches you exactly. And that's why people who are good at making Miis can make Miis where someone looks at it and said, oh, yep, that's Uncle Tom, that's Grandpa, that's Susie, right? You recognize the people because you have enough flexibility to make something that does not fit with the Nintendo aesthetic or whatever. And whereas everybody in Memoji looks like this just cherubic, sphere-faced, even Apple, when they did like little Memoji for all like the executive team or whatever. And like Phil Schiller looks nothing like Phil Schiller. Like the Phil Schiller Memoji, presumably done by the best minds, the best Memoji experts inside Apple. You cannot make a Memoji apparently that looks like Phil Schiller because his head just isn't shaped like that. And anyway, sorry to go on the Memoji rant, but if you happen to like, or if you just want to be an idealized cartoon version of yourself that doesn't actually look like you, check out Memoji and then your eyes can follow the cursor. Maybe.
Can I just, if you'll permit me, I don't want to complain this whole episode, but is it just me? Or does it seem like Apple likes Memoji a lot more than everyone else does?
I think people like it a lot. I see a lot of Memoji usage among non-nerd people. Like, I mean, even before that, remember Bitmoji? Like, there's been a lot of things online.
Bitmoji is huge, but even that, so I feel like Memoji, I think it was a really cool, fun thing, and I think it was a fad for a short time, and I think that time has passed. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone's using it.
When people pick that or make their Memoji and use it as their avatar, like all of us, once you find an avatar that you are okay with, you just tend to leave it there. And I think that, like, you're right that people aren't just like super excited about it, but it's like, oh, that's my avatar. I know people who have Bitmoji avatar right now, and they've had them for years. Like, I think that is fulfilling its role of give me a tool to make an avatar that I'm comfortable with to present to the world. And some people aren't comfortable with doing an actual photo of themselves. They want something more stylized. And so Memoji provides that. And I think Memoji, like, it's well implemented. The feature is well implemented. It has a lot of cool things to it. It's nicely modeled. You can do the whole tongue wagging, sticking out things. It's just fundamentally flawed as a way to capture people's likenesses, which if that's not what you want, if you don't want to capture your likeness, then fine. But if you want to capture your likeness, this is not the tool for you.
Yeah, I know a handful of people, nerdy and non-nerdy, that have Memoji as their like iMessage avatar, picture, whatever. And the funniest thing is, I can't remember who it is other than my dad, but there's a handful of people in my life that are all, older white dudes. And I swear to you, every single one of those Memojis looks absolutely identical. Like, oh, it's another old white guy. There you go. They're exactly the same. To John's point, exactly the same, every single one of them.
We are sponsored this week by ExpressVPN. We all take little risks every day when we go online, whether we think about it or not. We think our connection probably won't be spied on, or our pages won't have crap injected into them, or whatever. Our data probably won't be used against us. But every time you connect to an unencrypted network, cafes, hotels, airports, any hacker on the same network or anybody working for the network or the ISP it connects to can gain access to any data that's sent unencrypted over that network. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone, just some cheap hardware and software. A smart 12-year-old could do it. And your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling your personal info on the dark web. ExpressVPN creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that those hackers in the middle working on the Wi-Fi connection you're connected to or your ISP, they can't see any of your unencrypted data traveling over that connection. It would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. And ExpressVPN is simple to use on all of your devices. All you do is fire up the app and click one button to get protected. Personally, I won't use like hotel, airport, Wi-Fi, anything like that without a VPN because I just don't trust the network. And you shouldn't either, honestly. And if you're going to use a VPN, ExpressVPN is a very well-rated one. It's the one I use when I need it and can recommend it. So ExpressVPN, very simple. Secure your online data today at expressvpn.com/ATP. That's expressvpn.com/ATP, and you can get an extra 3 months free with a 1-year package. expressvpn.com/ATP. Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring our show.
All right, John, tell us. I know we have all been waiting with bated breath. What's going on with your mouse pad and your mouse?
We just had a few questions and theories from people after last show that I wanted to close the loop on. To recall, it was my mouse pad where the right side of it was not as good for tracking as far as my optical mouse was concerned as the left side of it. It's not really half and half. It's actually like a bad area that's more or less towards the right side. So one theory people had was maybe it's not the mouse pad, maybe it's the cable, because remember, my mouse is plugged in. And maybe when they were saying maybe when you go to the right side of the mouse pad, your cable bends in a certain way, and maybe you have like a break or a flaw inside the conductor, and when you do that, it causes interference, or it loses continuity for a short period of time, something like that. So maybe it's your cable. Check that, and nope, that's not it. It doesn't really matter where the cable is. I can move the cable around, I can wiggle it. It doesn't have any effect. It's only that spot in the mouse pad. The next theory was maybe it's not the mouse pad, maybe it's the desk surface, or something else emanating from the earth underneath where it is. To test that one, I just removed the mouse pad from where it is, and I put it on an entirely different place on the desk, and I rotated it 90 degrees various times and used the mouse on it. And the bad spot is really on the mouse pad. Wherever that bad spot is, no matter what surface I put it on, no matter how I rotate the mouse pad, you can track the bad spot, and the mouse has a little bit of trouble tracking on that spot. I did mean to this weekend cut myself a new mouse pad from one of my sheets of mouse pad material to eliminate this problem, but I got distracted at some point and didn't actually do that. So I'm still using the bad mouse pad, but on my to-do list is to cut a new mouse pad for myself.
That's an amazing to-do list.
It's something. It is something. We had a question from Jason Abreu, and he writes, "My name is Jason, and I'm soon to be married to my fiance in September of this year," which might have even been 2020 for all I know, but nevertheless.
I think we beat it. I think we got it. I think September means this fall, so we may actually be reading feedback in a timely manner.
Squeaking it in at the last second. All right. "I think that moving in and creating our own family is an opportunity to put in place some solid and safe process for us to handle our shared digital data. I was wondering if you could give me some advice on how you manage your family's digital life and documents. I'm concerned with digital backups of things like important receipts, which may be needed later for warranty purposes, insurance policy documents, fun stuff like that. I'm also thinking of things like shared bank statements or other types of financial documents. As for photos, I currently use Google Photos due to the fact that it's web-based, and I refuse to give Apple money for subpar online photo storage. My people. Ideally, I prefer an online self-managed
It's pretty
solution.
good. It's not subpar. It's pretty good.
I have an aside about this. I'll try to remember to talk about it after we get to this topic. But no, you're going to maybe like it. But anyway, coming back to what Jason wrote. Ideally, I prefer an offline self-managed solution, but I'm leaning more and more toward an online solution so I don't have to worry about physically maintaining hard drives. My concern with an online solution is if the service will be around 5 years from now and our documents actually stored in an encrypted, secure manner. I actually don't have too much to say about this because there's not a lot of documents that I consider to be precious. That being said, things like scans of our passports, our driver's licenses, birth certificate, our wills. So, for wills and things of that nature, we put them in 1Password. That's not to say that that's the best or most perfect place, but that's what I do, and it seems to work. And one of the nice things about 1Password for families, they're not a sponsor right now, and I don't remember if they've been in a long time, but one of the nice things about 1Password for families is that you can create different vaults. And so like I have a vault, Aaron has a vault, and then my business stuff is in its own vault. And then I also have like a vault dedicated mostly to travel documents like passports and birth certificates and driver's licenses and things like that. But also things like, Aaron and I each have our own will. And I'm trying to think of other examples. But for me, I like putting that stuff in 1Password because I'm super selective about what ends up in there. And if it's in 1Password, it's got to be really freaking important. And so that's what I do. For almost anything else that I don't consider is to be near as important or as critical, I just have it on my Synology sitting there in a particular folder where I can find that sort of thing easily if necessary, but it's not like super encrypted or anything like that. That's what I do. Marco, I have a feeling that you also don't have too much to say about this, famous last words. So let's start with you and then finish with John.
Yeah. By the way, some real-time follow-up. We had 1Password sponsor our show less than 1 month ago.
Wasn't that recently? God, I'm such a jerk.
It was June
I'm
10th.
the worst. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I love hand to God, I really do love 1Password. It is one of my favorite pieces of software on any of my devices. And I would say that partially because I feel guilty, but I also am saying that because I really honestly believe it. It is really, truly that good.
Yeah, and I'm also a 1Password user. I know John's not, but that's cool. You get two of the three of us. It's pretty good.
Is it cool? I don't know if it's cool. It's acceptable, but I don't know if it's cool.
Yeah, so I use 1Password. We also have the family account so that Tiff and I can have the shared vault between the two of us for like any kind of shared credentials or like any of we put any of our kids' credentials for his accounts. We put those in the shared vault so that Tiff and I can both have access. If he's like, hey, I got to log into Minecraft on my iPad or whatever, like we both, whichever parent is around, can help with that request. So that's very good. I too use it for very sensitive documents, things like passports, IDs, and stuff like that. But for the most part, like the big important stuff like wills and things like that, those are just like at lawyers' offices, and I have scans of them, but they're like we have like one of those fireproof boxes. Like it's not a safe, but it's like a fire resistant box, and like we have hard copies of all like that kind of stuff in that box. So to me, like anything like that, things that are of the nature of like if I am incapacitated or dead, what does my family or other people need from me for that? That I think is still better off living in the physical world as much as possible, because the digital world is so much harder for people to get into in that kind of scenario.
Actually, let me jump in right there because I would like to echo what you just said. A few years ago, I don't remember what the catalyst moment was for this, but I sat down and I wrote out, I call it my just in case document. And then the idea of this is if I were to just drop dead spontaneously, like what is the bare minimum amount of information that Erin needs to know about things that Erin doesn't typically, manage? What is the bare minimum she needs to know in order to continue her life and the kids' lives and continue paying bills and things of that nature? And, one of the big things on that document is sign into 1Password. That's where all my junk is. But nevertheless, a lot of that is like, here's who carries our insurance. Here's where our bank account, she knows some of this stuff. But what if Erin dies too? Like then my parents or somebody could come in and like recreate our lives. And not only does that document exist, which I think is an extremely smart thing for any family to do, but additionally, I have a paper copy in our fireproof quote unquote safe, which like you said, isn't really a safe. It's more of just a fireproof box. But I would like to strongly echo what you said about that. Having some sort of document with the bare minimum in order to get, your children or your spouse or whatever able to continue to live. I really, really encourage you to put that physically somewhere in addition to electronically somewhere.
Yeah, and that's legacy planning is a whole different thing of like how do you give people your passwords to stuff that is online, and that's a whole thing. But anyway, for the purposes of other documents, I'm not very organized because frankly I don't keep many documents. I do have a paperless lifestyle whenever possible for stuff like bills and crap like that, receipts, things like that. And my strategy for that is I have a sheet fed scanner. Back in my regular life, I have a Fujitsu ScanSnap, which I love. Here in my fake life, I have a Raven scanner, which is okay. It's really that's a whole separate topic. The Raven scanner is basically an Android tablet glued inside of a scanner.
Oh, cool!
It's very strange. Like my scanner has software updates, and where I'll have to I'll open it up one day to try to scan my electric bill or whatever. And it'll be like, so we need a software update. Tap here to do it, and you tap, and it has like the little like circle like finger cursor when you tap that Android tablets can have, and then it has to do like a software update. It has to reboot itself like an Android tablet does. It's once you realize that it's just an Android tablet, it makes a lot more sense. but the way it works is so bizarre as a scanner to work that way. And yeah, this world of like smart devices that are made, with commodity stuff, kind of, it has its downsides. And the downside of this is that it's basically a very, very slow, sluggish Android tablet that's powering this not cheap scanner that otherwise scans pretty well, but it's a very weird and awkward and sometimes very slow user experience. But anyway, so I honestly, I don't know if I would recommend this product. I use it, but this is not an endorsement or a condemnation, I guess. I feel ambivalent towards my Raven scanner. Anyway, so paperless lifestyle. If this scanner was, stolen or fell into the bay tomorrow, I would replace it with a ScanSnap, with a Fujitsu ScanSnap again. Anyway, paperless. So I basically scan everything to OCR'd PDFs so that they are searchable by text, but I dump them into one giant folder. The files are just named by date that I scan them. So it's just one giant chronological shoebox of everything that I've ever scanned. Because in practice, I hardly ever need to go back and look at these things. So I've tried over the years different organizational strategies for that, and I've never really found it worthwhile to actually categorize them into file folders and everything else. Here's all the electric bills. Here's all of the insurance renewals. I've never found that level of organization worth it or necessary for my scanned documents. Anything that is unscanned, that is just that originates as an electronic document, things like email receipts, I tend to just keep those in my email. My email itself is a giant document store, and it's all downloaded locally and searchable. And so any kind of important document or confirmation or information I need probably came through an email at some point. And so oftentimes that's how I dig things up, is I search through my email for this one email I got 15 years ago or 10 years ago that has this attached PDF that has this receipt on it or something. For other types of data, a lot of times this stuff just lives in its originating web service, and that's mostly fine. I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. Yeah, I know. I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon, and I can search my past orders on Amazon. And so that, to me, is another place where, that's a huge searchable history of the type of, data or document that is my purchase history. So if I need to know, when did I buy that hard drive that just died? Is it still under warranty? First thing I'll do is I'll look at Amazon history to see when I bought it. And then I'll know, okay, did I buy it within the warranty period or not? So stuff like that. I tend to have a lot of stuff in those few different silos, where it originated, and I tend to not move stuff out of those very often, into new silos. If it originates in a silo that I have ongoing access to, I tend to leave it there because it's just easier, and as long as I can trust it's going to be there. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep buying stuff from Amazon in the future. I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep having email in the future. Stuff that's kind of inherently long-term reliable. As for other types of documents, my code and everything, that's all in source control and everything, but that's a whole different thing. But other types of quote documents that would go in your documents folder, things like spreadsheets, word processing documents, that I just keep in the documents folder or in a very small number of subfolders of that. Every year I have a folder for my taxes for that year. So it's taxes 2021 is the current one, and it lives on my desktop for the whole year. And then once my taxes are filed for the year, I move it into the documents folder. And so I have taxes 2008, taxes 2009, all my tax documents and everything needed to support my tax documents. That goes in that year's storage, and that's it. Other than stuff like that, I don't have a large number of these things. I have a few spreadsheets that I kind of update on an ongoing basis. Those live in the documents folder, or I think on iCloud, maybe. That line is kind of blurred recently. I have a few things I keep in Dropbox, so I have easy access to them no matter what computer I'm on. But otherwise, I don't really have a lot of organization or strategy to most of this. Most stuff either lives in one of those giant silos that I kind of have ongoing access to, or it is kind of disorganized in my documents folder somewhere because I don't have enough documents, nor do I access them frequently enough for that mess of a system to be a problem.
So, John, what's the right way?
I mean, Marco definitely does the most of this stuff of the three of us. Like he's talked about his scan, snap, and stuff like that, and neither one of us do anything like that. But hearing Marco talk about it, I think my system is very similar to his, except imagine it run by somebody who doesn't want to do things electronically. And that person is not me, because my wife does the finances and the paperwork. And I say paperwork because she likes to do things on paper. Whenever there's an option for most of her life where it says, hey, we could send you your bill electronically, or you can get a paper version, she always says paper version. Hey, we could pay your bill automatically if you just give us your credit card number, or you can just, do it manually every month. She does it manually every month. Like, it's just what she's comfortable with. She manages all the stuff. So who am I to say, you could just set that up to auto pay and it would be fine. The only time I've ever won that debate is when we got a new credit card for my business for my LLC, and 1 month she forgot to pay it because it wasn't set up to be automatic. And I said, can I just set this up on auto pay? Because it was like a $20 bill, right? And she's like, fine, set it up on it, because so little happens on it that she never thinks to look at it. But she's the one who wants to manage it, so she does it the way she feels comfortable, and that involves a lot of paper. So yeah, paper things come to the house, and they are not scanned in any way. They just stay in paper form. The main sort of document management activity we do is much like Marco described. It's basically for tax purposes each year. We're collecting together receipts and things that we're going to deduct as business expenses and stuff like that. And that's tedious, but we basically do the same system, which is I have on my Mac a folder for each tax year, and I put in whenever I buy something that I know is attributable to the business, I make a PDF of the receipt and I stick it in the folder and do all that stuff, right? And then, but since I don't do the finance stuff over on my wife's computer, she's got a similar set of folders, and I periodically take my collected things that I've been doing and put them into her to process folder for the tax year. So it's like things that you haven't processed yet, because she's got a way that she wants to do it. I organize it the way I want to do it in folder by date by year, and I know what the receipts are for, and then periodically dump them into her sort of inbox, and then she grinds through them and names them the way she wants. In the end, it's not that many documents, but it's a screen full by the end of the year. Like, I'm not expensing tons of stuff. But yeah, things like that. Now, for almost everything else, like Marco said, email is great for keeping track of stuff, because another activity my wife engages in, which is looking at all of our credit card bills and saying, what's this charge? What's this charge? What was this? Right? Because you know how things show up on your credit card, and many companies try to warn you about this. Hey, you're going to get a bill on your credit card. It's going to say something that's not going to make any sense. Even though you're buying your thing from Acme Pet Store, it's not going to say Acme Pet Store. It's going to say VNDQXPR or something asterisk, right? And so when you see them on a credit card bill, it's not always clear what they are. The easy solution to finding the answer to that question is search for the exact amount in the email. And we both use Gmail, and she's logged into my Gmail thing or whatever. And if you just search for $15.95 in Gmail, and it'll give you the results sorted by date by default, the top item is whatever that receipt was. It's instant. It always works, and it answers your question. And then you could say, that's what Acme Pet Store was? Anyway.
That's really smart.
Yeah, so email is, I would say what's smarter is to not worry about the $15.95 charge. But anyway, she really wants to know what every single charge, she's been doing this for our entire married life. And so far, she has not caught a single case of a company charging us for things that we didn't actually buy. I guess that's the fear that somehow just charges will show up in your credit card. Now I say this, and she's going to tell me once I get off the air that there was a case sometime where we got double charged or something, and she found it. But to my recollection, it's not a common enough occurrence. But anyway, she deals with this is how she wants to do it. She wants to know what every charge is. Fine. For other documents, my whole backup vortex, I've got all of my stuff being backed up in a million different places. My digital stuff is way better protected than the paper stuff. The only reason we have any paper stuff is because A, she wants paper, and B, I forget how many years it is, but you can be audited back to X number of years or something. So you have to, in theory, keep the receipts for that number of years or whatever. Because we have all this paper, we try to keep a buffer of that number of years. And then we just, push off the end and, shred, which is another thing that's a hassle with paper things. You actually shred them if you care about this stuff. Shred off the end of the thing. But we're not running the Fortune 500 company at our house. It's not actually that complicated. The amount of actual paper is not that big. For our important documents, passports, driver's licenses, all that type of stuff, It's not particularly well protected. Yes, I suppose I do actually have scans of most of those things, but most of the reason I have them is not because I'm carefully preserving them. It's because online things very often want you to submit something like that, like for insurance purposes or like, who knows, if you ever try to do anything with cryptocurrency, they're always trying to get you to scan like your driver's license and upload it, which I generally refuse to do. In fact, I was trying to buy a domain name recently, and one of those, semi-slimy domain name, like registrar watch services, like, hey, that domain name you asked about in 1997, it's available. Do you want to bid on it? And I always go, sure, I'll give you $50. And they say, would you consider 30,000? Like, that's how that conversation always goes. Yeah. But anyway, this time they were like, you want to bid on this domain name? Like, sure, here you go, $50. What do you think? And they said, well, your account has been frozen because you need to upload your driver's license. I'm like, well, goodbye. I suppose there's probably some fraud related reason why they want all this information, but it's like, I don't want the domain name that much. Anyway, we're not really particularly obsessive about that stuff. If our house burned down, we would lose our passports. We would have to get new driver's licenses, but in the end, it would be fine. And then, important documents being with lawyers is another way you can do it. But honestly, anything that's really important, I do have in digital form, and then it's backed up 20 ways to Sunday. For this question here that Jason had, which gets into more than just digital documents, but also like photos and stuff like that, I would, and we've talked about this in the past, so I don't want to go into too much, but I would definitely recommend, as part of whatever your sort of data backup strategy is, not to just rely entirely on cloud backup. You should have cloud backup because it's physically distant and it's generally economical, and it's another factor in your security of like a different thing that would have to fail. But I would suggest very strongly, as annoying as it is, to have local backups of stuff, because the main failure mode is probably not going to be your house burning down. It's probably going to be you accidentally hosing something, or like a SSD or hard drive going bad, right? So don't say, I just have my computers and then cloud. That's not enough. You need something in the middle there, which is a local backup. And I know it's a pain in the butt. It's expensive. It's cumbersome. Where am I going to keep this local backup? It's another thing for me to futz with. Do I have to get a Synology now? Do I have to get a tower computer so I can put internal storage? Do I have to have a bunch of SSDs dangling off the end of my computer? I know it's annoying, but I highly recommend including that tier, that sort of, cache, that tier in your cache hierarchy of your backup thing, because just cloud is not enough. I'm not saying cloud is unreliable, but it's so distant from you, and cloud companies are flaky, and the bottom line is it's just one thing. You need to have another thing, and no two cloud backup companies probably isn't as good either. And it's a pain to restore from. It's very distant from you. Yes, they will send you a hard drive and stuff or whatever, but having it locally gives you much more peace of mind, and will let you sort of see the data flowing through more easily, because you see both the source and then the place you're backing up to. Whereas with the cloud thing, you're just kind of trusting that you'll notice if like it's been failing to back up for the past 10 days, or like some weird problem is causing it to silently fail or whatever. So I would recommend the middle tier there. I would not recommend my system of actual paper filing cabinets and paper bills and stuff like that, because there's too much stuff to forget or whatever. But it just goes to show that, like, if, defer to the person who is managing this stuff. Most people don't manage their own paperwork sort of equally with their partner, business partner or life partner, just because it's confusing. So normally one person sort of says, I'm going to be the one to manage the bills. I'll make sure we pay them, and I'll make sure we don't double pay them. Whereas both people are equally responsible for the bills. I feel like it's a situation where an email goes out at work to 5 people, and that just gives everyone an excuse not to do anything about it because it wasn't addressed to me, right? That's my advice on managing this. And then whoever is managing this stuff, let them use whatever system that they're most comfortable with, even if that system seems barbaric to you or whatever, because in the end, they're doing it and it has to fit their brain and the way they want to do it. And I don't think, like, again, with the possible exception of Marco, who has sort of some continuity of functionality of an application that he sells that we'd want to continue after his death. Most of us, if we die, it's okay for all of our stuff to just drop on the floor. Like, we're not running a Fortune 500 company. We're not responsible for the lives of thousands of people, right?
Neither is my business. Like,
true, but like I'm saying,
it doesn't matter that much.
What if your family wanted to continue your business as a way of making money? You know what I mean? Like there is continuity of like income for the family, as in when you're gone, that thing could still be a going concern, and its value would be damaged by it just suddenly falling over and no one having any idea to bring it back up, how to bring it back up. You know what I mean? Like, and it's an asset, right?
I should probably start commenting my code.
Yeah, and it's an asset. Even if you just wanted to sell it or whatever, it loses value if, like, oh, Marco died and then Overcast broke and never worked again, right? Anyway, what I'm saying is that of the three of us, at least you have something like that for me and Casey. If Erin can't get to your source code, honestly, she'll live, right? It's like it's not that big of a deal, and I think that's true of a lot of people's stuff. Again, passports, like I don't even know if the digital version of your passport is worth anything. Like, is that useful for anything, just other than making you feel good? But either way, if our house burns down and we lose our passports, we can go get new ones. Like, we're not international travelers constantly, and certainly not now, right? So generally, I'm chill about the fact that many things in our life are vulnerable to being gone because I don't even have a fire safe, right? I don't even have like a fireproof box. Like, yeah, if our house burns down, boy, we're losing a lot of stuff.
By the way, can we not hear from all like the safe people? Like, because I know a fireproof box is different from a safe. I know a fireproof safe is different from a regular safe. I know these are all very different things. We don't have to hear about it. I actually researched these things a few years back and discovered, like quite how massive and heavy an actual fireproof actual safe is when it's one thing and all this stuff. We really don't need to hear the details. Thank you for writing in already. I know if you are using that feature in Gmail where you can like unsend the email within a certain amount of time, please go back and unsend the one you sent a half hour ago. We don't need it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, you need a salt waterproof safe because when the hurricane comes and washes away your house, like the fire is not your problem.
Yeah.
The salt water is going to leak in and just destroy all the stuff. Yeah. If you actually care about the physical safety of things like paper and stuff, keep it somewhere else, like not in your house, in someone else's house, trade with a friend or a relative, rent a storage space. Like what you're trying to do is say, if there's a disaster here, at least there won't also be a disaster there. I mean, I suppose if a nuclear bomb hits New York City, like your storage facility is probably also gone, but then losing your passports is probably the least of your worries. So I don't spend too much time worrying about this stuff. We are probably less protected from silly losses than we could be. We're just playing the odds that, our house isn't going to burn down. And mostly just our main concerns are like pragmatic. Come tax time, which is the main time we have to deal with family digital documents. Come tax time, can we find all the crap that we need to find to do all the things that we need to do and get filed? Every year it seems like, it's kind of a hassle or whatever, but like the system that we have is enough to get us through tax time every year, right? And to feel like from week to week and month to month, we are more or less on top of our finances. My wife also does the finances. I think I mentioned this before. She uses You Need a Budget, which is not pronounced Yabnab, but that's what I call it, which recently moved online. We had used Quicken before that, mostly at my insistence, but she didn't like it. And then Quicken 2007 became the latest version for way too long. And then the new Quicken came and it was weird. Anyway, some kind of program to manage your finances, to stay on top of, again, whoever's doing that stuff. If they just want to go to the bank's website and use that thing, fine. If they want to use Yabnab to make a budget and try to stick to it, fine. Like, whatever. Just, I think it is not as dire as like, when we talk about this stuff in the past, we tend to be preachy about like, back up all your stuff, back up all your photos. I think that is so much more dire than keeping track of all your receipts. Like, if there's some catastrophe that happens, are you going to be more sad that you lost 5 years worth of receipts or all the pictures of your kids? That's why we harp on like protecting your family photos so much more than we ever talk about. Here's my sophisticated filing system for every restaurant I ever ate on and how much I tipped, so I can put it in a spreadsheet and calculate it and show you trends over time. Like, no, that's not as important as pictures of your kids or pictures of yourselves or anything like that. Like, photos are so much more valuable than everything else, which is why at least I personally spend so much more time making sure all of my sort of precious, irreplaceable family memories that are in digital form are massively protected. Meanwhile, my passports, driver's license, and electric bills are just going to burn with the house.
For someone who is so completely anal retentive and over the top about your digital stuff, I really want to make fun of you for not having basically any protection for physical things. But your logic does make sense, John Syracuse says. It often does. And yeah, I can't entirely blame you. I just wanted to kind of echo a couple of things you said. I am not quite as dedicated to paper stuff as Tina, but that dedication has only been waning in the last year or two. I do plug in all of our expenditures and things of that nature. I do it in former sponsor Banktivity, which has native apps for all Apple platforms. I used to use Quicken 2007 for years and years and years and years, even long after 2007 had come and gone. I personally like having that feeling of I would say control, but maybe awareness over where our money is going. I don't think. Yeah, the good news is we are not living, paycheck to paycheck, so it wouldn't be critical for me to know, we spent $20 at McDonald's and that's put us way over the budget for this month, and now we might not be able to pay our mortgage. Like there was a time that was me. I think I've mentioned on the show many times that like I would treat myself to one McDonald's value meal a week when I had first started working and being a real adult. And I felt like more than, and actually I think it was factual, more than one like $7 McDonald's meal in a week would not financially ruin me, but put me in a genuinely bad spot. So anyway, I bring all this up to say I still like having that awareness. I still like having that control, maybe. And then somebody put in the chat, and I think we should bring it up. Former sponsor Backblaze has put together a really good reference to the 3-2-1 backup strategy, which I think is a really good way of looking at how to back up your digital stuff. So what is this? How does this work? It's 3 different copies, 2 of which can be local but different things, so like different drives or like CD and hard drive or whatever, and at least 1 copy that is not in your house. And for stuff like pictures and whatnot, I think that you, me, and probably Marco as well are easily achieving this. For other things, perhaps not. But for stuff like you had said, John, like pictures that you really, really, really don't want to lose, that you can't get back from anyone else, I can't stress enough, be it Backblaze or someone else, try to figure out how to do a 3-2-1 setup for yourself.
Yeah, the flip side of the picture things, by the way, is one of the reasons that I've spent an ungodly amount of money printing photo books from Apple Photos, and Mimeo and Apple Photos is gone now, is because it's kind of the reverse backup. If I have a digital disaster and somehow my 19 copies of my photos all get erased from the internet, probably through like ransomware or some other terrible malicious thing, at least I have now essentially, I have like several feet of physical photo albums in the form of photo books.
Several feet?
Yeah.
That's the unit of measure for pictures.
Right.
As measured by shelf space of these books, like sort of lining my shelf. It's maybe like 3 feet, maybe. Anyway, and I try not to calculate the price when I look at that because these books are so expensive. But you don't have to do it that way. You could just making photo prints of your digital things is a reverse backup of your digital stuff. And now I would be devastated if I lost all my digital photos because I have, 130,000 of them. And there's probably, maybe 1,000 photos in those books, but 1,000 of my best photos is better than 0 photos. So, and plus making physical copies of your photos is a good idea. Obviously we have pictures and picture frames around the house and everything too, but having actual albums where you just, print your favorite pictures at Walgreens at the end of the year and stick them in an album, like just something minimal like that. Doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to do these silly photo books that I pay for, but it's nice to have that as a backup. And it's also nice to have that as a thing that you can just leaf through. Like one of the gifts I give my parents frequently is, photo albums of pictures of their grandkids, which they appreciate. I do wonder how much they look at them, but I do know for a fact that they're not like perusing my digital pictures online, even though they technically could in various ways. So I'm hoping that, hey, I give you this photo book and you flip through it when you get it and then you put it on your shelf. But maybe, you sit down on the couch one day and see the book and take it out and flip through it again. It's nice to have physical copies of your photos for people who aren't so connected with digital life that they routinely flip through photos on their phone or look at their little memories from Apple. Like some people do that or even have digital picture frames or whatever, but not everyone does that. Not everyone is accustomed to that. And even if you are, having physical copies is nice as well.
So I alluded to earlier that I had a bit of an epiphany with regard to Apple One. And this came because I got my first bill for Apple TV Plus. And we are working through the second season of For All Mankind, which we are on the penultimate episode. No spoilers, but oh boy, things just got serious. And I'm very excited to continue watching that. Ted Lasso comes out in just a couple weeks, so you bet that I'm not canceling Apple TV Plus anytime soon. But I got this $5 bill for Apple One, or I'm sorry, for Apple TV Plus. And I've been getting $10 a month bills for Apple Fitness Plus, and I've been getting, I think, $10 a month bills for iCloud storage. And it occurred to me as I got this new $5 bill, I'm really approaching the amount of money I would probably be spending on Apple One or whatever that's what it's called, right? Apple One, the like get everything.
Right, that's right. It's called Apple One because there's more than one plan because that makes total sense.
Right, totally. So anyway, so it occurred to me that, if I'm spending, what is that, like $25, $25 a month on various Apple services, why wouldn't I just pony up the extra $5 to get a whole ton more iCloud storage? Maybe finally put us on a family plan, and
iCloud photo library,
and give me iCloud photo library,
maybe,
and Apple Music, which I don't think I care about because I am a devout Spotify person. You please don't at me. But it occurred to me
the ultimate luxury of getting Apple Music when you use Spotify is the same reason I have Spotify and Apple Music, is just being able to follow other people's links and hear music. Because the Spotify people think everyone has Spotify, and the Apple Music people think everyone has Apple Music. And when people send links to songs, I don't use either one of those services, but I pay for both of them, so I can follow people's links. And that's not the main. I mean, my daughter is into Spotify, so I'm basically paying for that for her. And Apple Music, I get it because it's part of Apple One, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and so there's a really great, just very quickly, there's a really great website. I think it's called SongWhip. If that's not right, I'll put it in the show notes. But it can, and I'm sure this is not the only one, but it's one that's been very reliable for me that will let you go back and forth between different services. So, you can put in a Spotify link and you'll get out a more generic link that you can share.
Isn't it? This service is kind of like song.link, which I think might be spyware, malware. I don't know. But like
cool.
the function of these websites is, because the problem I just described are like, hey, if you want to link to something, it just might be natural for you to give a Spotify link. But then if you actually think about it for a second, you're like, oh, but what about the people who don't have Spotify? How are they going to listen to this thing? Well, I don't know what service everyone subscribes to, so how do I just link to a song? These meta sites exist that say, if you want to link to a song, here, link to this web page on our site, and this web page will say, listen to the song in huge list of services. So then you land on the web page, and then you just tap on whatever service that you actually pay for, if any of them, and maybe they also have like a free YouTube link or whatever. And so, in the context of Twitter or whatever, if you want to link to a song, you link to one of those sites. I used to use song.link because I saw people using it, but I think it might be shady. I have seen this SongWhip one, and that's the context I've seen it, where it's just a landing page with 20 links to the same song, which I think is a great thing. And I would love a more reliable, like if Apple did something like that. Obviously Apple's not going to do it because they're not going to link to Spotify, but like some company that I trusted not to turn that link into terrible malware 10 years down the line would be great. But in the meantime, I have used those things sometimes when tweeting.
Yep. So anyway, so it occurred to me, you know what, it's probably about time that I start actually taking action on this and not just kicking this can further and further and further down the road. So I haven't done anything yet, but to recap, the current setup is I have my own Apple ID and my own store account. Erin has her own Apple ID, but she is riding on my App Store account. So the good news is she doesn't have like a bunch of her own purchases and things. Like they're all our purchases, or really strictly speaking, they're my purchases. And so I think it'll be relatively straightforward, he says, famous last words as he knocks on wood, that in order to convert mine to be like the family, I don't know, maven or boss, I don't know what the correct term is in Apple parlance, but the family organizer, if you will, and then just add Erin's like iMessage ID, her standard Apple ID to that new family, and then hopefully that'll work out. But if you're in this situation, you have this exact situation where you had the complete picture Apple ID, or your spouse did, and then the other one of you joined a new family. Like if you're in this scenario and you've lived this, only if you've lived exactly this, please reach out via email or Twitter and let me know what you've done, because sometime in the next couple of weeks, I think I'm going to try to take the plunge. And so that means I'll do, a family plan finally that'll give Erin iCloud backups, which she hasn't had in forever, I don't think. It'll give me iCloud backups potentially because I'll finally have the space for it. And then the next step is to get, more likely than not, to get some big, huge honking SSD to put all my pictures on. And I don't even remember how much space my pictures take up. But I don't think I want to sacrifice all that space on my iMac for reasons I can't even put my finger on. So if I don't just put them on my iMac, then I'm going to need some sort of big hard drive to put them, or big SSD to put them on, which is going to be several $100s. So suddenly I've gone from $15 a month to several $100s and $30 a month. Oh, that's what happens these days. But yeah, I think it's time.
You should listen to ATP because we talked about this exact scenario many shows ago. I did the thing you're describing.
Did you?
I
Okay.
had the Apple ID that owned everything in the entire family, just like you do now. And my wife had an Apple ID, but she'd never purchased anything on it. And we made a family, and I became the family organizer, and my wife joined the family, and then we had kids, and they joined the family. Like, it'll be fine. We talked about it.
All right. I remember talking. I couldn't remember what the details were with either. To be honest, I thought it was Marco that had the same situation.
I mean, you could potentially screw it up if you do something weird during it, but I'm saying like the scenario you just described, I did that. That's exactly what I did. And so far, it's been fine. Now, the other weird thing about it is we continue to purchase things through my Apple ID. We don't have to. My wife could purchase things on her Apple ID and sometimes does. But in general, just for simplicity's sake, I continue to buy most of the stuff on my Apple ID because everyone has access to it. If I buy it, and in-app purchases are, I think you can opt into that or whatever, and it's changed over the years. But in general, I buy it, and then everyone in the family has access to it. You don't have to keep doing that. You can switch after you do the family to doing individual purchases, and that's fine too. And the kids sometimes purchase their own stuff when they get like gift cards for iTunes or whatever. But as we said on past shows, it works surprisingly well.
Yeah, I've been doing Apple Family sharing for years and years and years. I think within a few months of them introducing it, I think my whole family was in it. And it's been great. I've had no problems. Like, Tiff and I are the adults on the account. I'm pretty sure us using family sharing predated Adam existing, but once Adam existed, he was added to the account. Like, it's been totally fine, and there's all sorts of great things, like with the parental, like ask for permission for in-app purchases or for screen time extensions on limits and stuff like that. It's fantastic. It works very, very well, and I commend Apple for getting that really right really early on because it's been great. We are sponsored this week by Linode, my favorite place to run servers. Go to linode.com/ATP and see why Linode has been voted the top infrastructure as a service provider by both G2 and TrustRadius. From their award-winning support, 24/7, 365 offered to every level of user regardless of your plan size, to their ease of use and their setup, it's clear why developers like me have been trusting Linode for projects both big and small since 2003. I think I've been there since about 2010 or so I've been there a while. You can deploy your entire application stack with Linode's one-click app marketplace, or build it all from scratch and manage everything yourself with supported centralized tools like Terraform, or do it all yourself just raw with their API and with your own Linux setup. That's what I do, and it's wonderful. I've been with a lot of hosts. Linode is by far my favorite one. They have the best price to performance ratio for all their compute instances, including their specialty plans, GPU instances, high RAM, memory, dedicated CPUs, as well as their block storage service, managed Kubernetes support, and their upcoming bare metal services release. Linode makes cloud computing fast, simple, and affordable, allowing you to focus on your project, not your infrastructure. Visit linode.com/ATP and create a free account with either your Google account, your GitHub account, or your email address, and you get $100 in credit. Once again, linode.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Linode for hosting all my servers and for sponsoring our show.
Let's move on and do some Ask ATP. I don't know how much we're going to get through, but Carlos Luis Portillo writes, Portillo, I would suppose. What is the latest on y'all's desk chairs? A few years back, Marco talked about his experience with the Embody, and John had just purchased one. Have any of y'all tried anything new, or is the Embody still the one to get? I will start because I'm extremely boring and simple. I still have a gifted desk chair that I am sitting on that is fine. And I probably should get a better one, but I'm cheap and I haven't. So that's my story. Same as it ever was. Marco, what do you got going on?
I still like the Embody for most desk usage. That being said, for the beach, I got an Aeron. I had a couple of summers here where I just got like a cheap, Amazon Basics, whatever. And because it's the beach, there's a lot of moisture and heat here. I didn't want to ruin a nice chair with that. But once I started spending longer times out here in the summertime, having the Amazon Basics chair was killing my back. I noticed the difference. It sucked. It's fine for whatever, $50 that it cost, and it's fine for temporary short-term use or, not very many hours in a day. But I noticed the difference when I was sitting in that for, my full-time job. So I upgraded to, I wanted to get a Herman Miller chair for here, and I know the Embody is great, but because it's so hot and humid here, the Embody has a lot more like fabric that's thicker and touching your body compared to the Aeron, which is very cool and mesh-like. So I went Aeron for this. I'd used them back in my days when I worked for actual other people, and so I knew that Aerons were good for me and they fit me well. And so I went with that, and it's great. Again, it's Herman Miller. It's expensive, but it's very well made. It has I think 10 or 12 year warranty, and it's awesome. So no regrets.
John?
So, I mean, the one of the advantages of buying a horrendously expensive chair is that you don't have to think about chairs for a while. So I'm still using the Embody. I liked it when I bought it. I still like it now. It is the same as when I bought it. That's why you spend a lot of money on a chair, I suppose. My wife had the Steelcase Gesture, and I have to say, despite the fact that she liked that chair better than this one, it has not held up as well. It has more creaks and more things that are, wearing a little bit on that chair. The creaks really annoy me because we spent a lot of money for that Gesture, and I don't want anything to be creaking. And there's like this plastic panel that keeps like popping off that I have to tuck back in, whereas the Embody is like the day I got it. Like it shows no wear, it does not make any noises. There's no extra play or slop in any portion of it. So, but that doesn't mean that you should get an Embody. Like, remember what we did with the chairs? I tried to do as much research as I could. I went to stores and sat in lots of different chairs, and then we bought 2 different chairs, hoping that one of us would like one, at least one of us would like one, and then we could return the other one. And it just so happens we got lucky that my wife liked the Gesture and I liked this one. So, hey, we were all set. We didn't have to return anything. But you have to sit in chairs with your body, ideally for longer than 5 seconds in the store, but at least for 5 seconds in the store, because I went to lots of these fancy ergonomic chair stores and sat in a whole bunch of chairs, and you could tell sometimes, no, this one doesn't fit my body, or this one's a maybe, or whatever. So don't just buy the Embody because you hear a bunch of podcasters got it, not least of which is because it's so expensive. You really have to like this chair to do that. But you should get, to Marco's point, a good chair that you like, that's comfortable for you. And yes, money is somewhat of a proxy for durability and comfort, but not always. Like, there's lots of very expensive chairs that I sat in that I would be miserable in, right? So don't just buy based on price, and don't just buy because you hear us talk about something, but please do buy a decent chair that fits you well. My chair that I had prior to this, as we discussed, was a $250 chair, which was, at the time I bought it, it was the horrendously expensive chair of the 20-something John, right? Because that was a lot of money for me when I was, making a lot less money at my very first job out of college and living in Georgia or whatever. And that chair was not a high quality chair, but hey, $250 in 1998, like that's, I don't know what that translates to, but it's not a cheap chair. It's not a $50 chair. And that one did slowly deteriorate and get creaky or whatever. But I was glad that I spent that money on that because I was going to be working from home at that time and I didn't want a $50 chair. The $250 chair lasted me until just a couple of years ago. So definitely get a decent chair. Spend a little bit more money than you think you should spend, but don't necessarily buy the specific fancy chair that a bunch of podcasters you listen to bought.
All right, moving right along. Stephen Kim writes, I'm thinking about getting a dedicated camera. My biggest gripe with this kind of photo taking process is the ingest process. Oh, don't even get me started. I connect the SD to my M1 iMac and then go through the photos in Finder, deleting the bad shots, and then importing the rest to Photos. This is sounding all too familiar. The problem is previewing a photo in Finder. These are not instant. There's an ever so slight lag going from one photo to the next. The Photos app itself is better, so I can import these photos and prune them there, but it feels wasteful to import a bunch of photos that will automatically start uploading to the cloud when I know a vast majority of them are bad shots and are going to be deleted. It's like I wrote this. I'm curious to know what each of you do when taking photos from your big cameras and ingest them into your photo library. That's lowercase photo library because this is what Stephen wrote. That's lowercase photo library because I believe Casey still needs to switch over to iCloud photo library. Well, look at what we just talked about. I have talked on and off about my photo ingest process for a while, but in broad strokes, it's kind of sort of what you're talking about. I go through an SD card using Finder. I don't love it, especially when I'm loading RAWs, especially when I'm doing it on anything but my iMac Pro. I don't tend to keep very many RAW photos. It's only things that I think are like really, really fantastic shots, but I shoot in JPEG and RAW just in case. To come to think of it, I don't think I've ever used a RAW photo in the 7 years I've had a big camera, but
this is why you have 1.2 terabytes
I know, it's
of
true.
photos.
It's true.
I still have less than a terabyte of photo, and I have way more photos than you. And you know why? No RAWs, or very few RAWs. So
I think you're right.
You've got a RAW problem.
I think you're right.
I think there's a cream for that.
Oh Lordy. Well, anyways, so I get them down to what I think is reasonable on the SD card. Then I use an app called Geotag, which is sufficient. I don't love it, but it works in order to geotag the photos that have come in off the big camera, because it's really important to me to have geographic information on those photos, because it's not unusual for me to look up things by where they were taken. So I use Geotag to tag them to at least an approximation of where they were taken. And then I use my bespoke app that I wrote that is not going to be open source because the code sucks. It's not going to be for sale because it sucks, but it does work for me. And that's the thing that like files it away on my Synology into folders for years, folders for months, and then ISO, whatever. So it's, 2021-07-07, and then the time after that. It's not great. I don't love it. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get to using iCloud Photo Library. I guess I would import to the Synology and then drag from the Synology into Photos, which is super convoluted and weird, which is part of the reason I've never used iCloud Photo Library, but here we are. But I don't know. It's wonky. Marco, I've given you first shot for the last several. So John, what are you doing these days?
Yeah, I'm speaking to Stephen, but I'm also speaking to Casey here. So I don't know why either one. Well, I know why Casey is. Importing into the Finder when you're planning on putting in photos, don't do that. Just import directly into Photos. If there's one thing the Photos actually does a reasonable job at, is imports. It has a separate dedicated section showing your photos organized by when you imported them, which is essential for organizing because they're not necessarily the order that they were taken in. There's not date order because you might be importing from multiple cameras. And anyway, import into Photos. Yes, I understand, like, I import them, but I'm not going to keep most of them, and I don't want to waste time uploading it. Don't worry about it. That's what the computer is there for. Just delete the ones you don't want. If that was,
I have empathy for the computer, John.
But I can tell you that the upload speed, especially if you don't have gigabit fiber like I do, but even if you do, you're going to probably be able to go through them faster than your computer can upload them, just because Photos is lackadaisical about getting around to pushing your stuff up or whatever. But even if it doesn't, it's fine. Like, I swear it's fine. And sometimes it'll save your butt because you'll be like, I want this one, and then you'll go through it and you realize, you know what? I thought I had more angles in that one shot, and even though I picked the one I like, I actually would like those other ones back. Guess what? Look in your recently deleted things, and it'll be in there. And if it's not in recently deleted, it might be on another computer recently deleted because it got uploaded. But don't worry about it. Like, it's the whole point of a cloud library. Just import into Photos, sort in Photos, delete in Photos. They'll go into recently deleted 30 days or whatever later. They'll get purged from recently deleted. Like, it takes care of itself. That's why you want a photo library. That's why you don't want a hand-organized shoebox of files like Casey has. And guess what? Photos does a pretty good job of previewing images quickly. Like, don't use the Finder and Quick Look as your way of going through Photos. It's just, no. And by the way, once you get into any kind of workflow with Apple Photos or literally any other program that manages Photos, you'll get into a nice workflow of hitting the period key to mark thing as a fave, or knowing the keyboard shortcuts to quickly crop or do whatever, or applying adjustments to multiple photos, or tagging things, or getting into a workflow with an actual dedicated Photos app is way, way better than using the Finder. Please stop using the Finder.
Sorry, Dad. All right, Marco, what do you got?
So in an ideal world, I can see a pretty good argument for shooting RAW plus JPEG. And the reason why is that in most cases, you would just import the JPEG and leave the RAW alone. And the idea would be that you would go through your JPEGs and you would pick and choose the ones you like best, and you would be able to tell pretty quickly, are there any of these that I'm going to need to or want to edit to such a degree that the RAW would be beneficial? So am I making like large changes to the color, temperature, color balance, or do I need to pull a whole lot of detail out of the shadows or highlights? And you can tell that pretty quickly, like in your first pass going through them, like, am I really going to need the RAW for this ever? And for the few that you do, keep those. For all the rest of the ones that you don't, get rid of the RAWs, and then you just have all the JPEGs. And then put those into, Apple Photos for long-term storage after maybe sending them through something like Lightroom for like the RAW tweaking and everything. Okay. That's what I would do in an ideal world. In the real world, I basically never use big cameras anymore, in part because this process is so cumbersome and I sucked so badly at having any kind of discipline to actually do it. So in reality, what I did for a while was try to occasionally shoot photos on a nice big camera, see how awesome they were, import them into Photos as RAW, never do anything with them really, forget to ever pick through them, and then eventually, I would forget about them, and then there's this massive like 30 gig block of photos from this day like sitting in my photo library forever, taking up space on all my devices forever. I would have duplication problems where like, okay, well, I would want to edit the RAWs in Lightroom, which I now what is now known as Lightroom Classic, old Lightroom. I'd want to edit them there because that had the better RAW editor of anything I'd used. But then I'd want to like actually have my photo library live in iCloud Photo Library, so everything could be in one place, and the iPhone could be automatically included in that and everything. So I would ideally edit in Lightroom and then ship everything over to Photos app and then delete them out of my Lightroom, whatever. In practice, didn't do that right either. In practice, I would just have 2 copies of everything and not know, like, can I safely delete this from here? Is this my only copy of this photo? Am I going to have 3 or 0 copies of this photo that I'm trying to have 1 copy of? It was a mess. And so the reality is I just don't use big cameras anymore for multiple reasons, but this was a big one that I just never really nailed this process. I was always sloppy about it, and I would always have all the best intentions and very ambitious ideas of what I would do, and then what I would do in real life was very different and inferior and much lower effort and sloppier. I actually, I know this is not the time to wedge this in, but hey, it's our show. I think it would be really interesting to consider the idea, I know this would never actually happen, but just to consider the idea, what if Apple made a dedicated camera? Now, I know why they don't. I know that basically the phone is their dedicated camera in addition to being a phone, and that it's already this $1,000 thing that we upgrade every few years, and it takes great pictures and uses all their AI and everything. But wow, can you imagine how amazing it would be if you could give Apple's silicon and integration benefits to a device that could have bigger glass and bigger sensors? Can you imagine what it could do? Like, look at what it does with little tiny garbage glass and little tiny garbage sensors that you can fit in a phone, and just make it the size of a point and shoot. I'm not even saying make it like a giant SLR or even mirrorless. Obviously, Apple doesn't even need that much physical space for their stuff to make it amazing. Just make it like the size of like a Sony RX100 series thing. Imagine what they could do with that. But I recognize that's not the world that we live in. But if they would ever do that, that would be such a dream setup of like, imagine that Apple makes a camera that just uploads to your photo library like a phone. That would be just automatically. You just take the pictures and a few seconds later they're there. Oh my God, that would be incredible.
Yep.
And I think that's part of the reason why iPhones are everyone's camera for the most part. Like it not only is it always with you, and not only is it a better camera now than most cameras most people can buy that are operated in most people's hands, but also, what do you want to do when you take a picture? You might want to share it somewhere. You might want to send it to somebody or post it on Instagram or something. Like, that's such a common thing. Like, what's the next step you want to do with this picture? And when you're working with a regular, non-phone camera, that process is so cumbersome and heavy and time-consuming and data-consuming. And it's so easy to basically fall out of it like I did. So my answer to this question is I don't have a process to ingest photos from my big camera to my photo library because I no longer even do that at all.
It sounds like you never really had much of a process. You had an idea of a process, but you weren't actually executing on it. I would not recommend trying to use Lightroom and Photos. Like, I realized I kind of skipped over like what my process is. My process is I take pictures with my big camera. I connect my camera to my computer with USB and import the photos into Photos. and I only shoot in JPEG. That's it. That's the whole process. Like there is no importing into another app. There's no manual organization. The new camera does have a geotagging app. I'm not sure if it's working. I think it might be, but in the end, like I don't care as much as Casey about the geotagging integration. If I did, I would try harder to get this weird Sony app to work. Like I can look at the picture and more or less tell where it is. But yeah, that's my workflow. And I've talked about how annoying it is that I have to import my phone pictures into my wife's library because she owns the library, but that's a problem that no one has solved as far as I'm aware. And I'm willing to deal with that annoyance, in the hopes that someday Apple will remedy this in exchange for using what for me has been a very reliable system of maintaining my photo library. I've printed books from it back when it was called iPhoto. It lets me organize my stuff. The minimal amount of editing that I do, I can do within the application. I have complaints about the application, but in general, it has the trend, although it has been very bumpy with a big dip when they iOSified everything. It has been positive over time. And, I keep expecting someday Apple Photos to just totally fall over and fail me, and then I'll have to find some new solution. But that day hasn't come yet. It's just always, teetering on the edge of falling over for my, like I said, 140,000 photos. There's some RAWs mixed in there, but generally not that many, mostly because I don't want to end up in the situation where my photos can't fit. Because I do want my photos on the main hard drive, the main thing that I back up. I don't want it to be a separate thing. So if I took everything in RAW, this would be, terabytes, right? But because they're mostly JPEGs with a smattering of RAWs thrown in, I'm able to have a huge number of photos and not take up that much room. And it really does make a difference. Like Marco said, when I first got a camera that shot RAW, I did a bunch of RAW shooting and I saw what this would look like if you do this at the volume I take pictures, and it's just too much, right? Not just the processing overhead, but just the plain like how much space is this taking up on disk? And it makes you be so much more brutal about deleting stuff. I prefer in my ingestion flow to mostly keep anything that is not, I'll keep the 7 different versions of the same picture, unless they're out of focus or something or whatever. But I'll keep them just because, hey, they're JPEGs. It's really not that big. I'm not as brutal as I would be if I had RAWs. I would really, really want to narrow it down. And then, so that's my ingest flow and my outgest. I don't know the outward flow. Like again, I had some friend visit recently, and we hadn't seen them in a while. Took a whole bunch of pictures that day on my big camera. Connected my big camera over the cable to my computer. Imported into Photos. Pick, delete, crop, edit. Chucked a bunch into a temporary folder, shared to my shared photo library. Everybody sees them. Done. It's like, 15 minutes worth of activity. Then that includes also importing from my phone, which involves connecting my phone to my computer with a wire, importing into image capture because Photos is broken, dragging it into Photos. But they all just go into Photos, organize, pick, crop, select, shared photo album, share, done. That's a privilege I have as someone who's like relatives all use iPhones and can see all the photos, but either way, like it is the all Apple, all JPEG, straightforward workflow. Even if you have both a dedicated camera and a bunch of iPhones, can work, and it's reasonable. Please avoid the Finder, and please don't try to use Lightroom and Photos at the same time.
Marco, does Tiff ever use the big camera, her big camera, or y'all's big camera?
She uses it all the time. I see that like part of Marco's retirement from fancy cameras is suddenly Tiff has access to all the cameras. I was surprised when I saw her using the Sony in a recent some social thing. I was like, oh, she's not using the Canon for these things. She needs some better long lenses for the whale pictures, though.
That's true.
You don't realize how long it is. So
I do. I know how far you are from the beach, and I know where that whale is. But I'm just saying, like,
the lens is the Sony 200 to 600, and we have a 2x teleconverter on it to bring it to 1200. Yeah. Which does also drop off tons of light and makes the photos. I mean, it's not a super sharp lens to begin with.
Yeah, they're plenty bright, but they're very soft.
And that's part. It is part of the lens problem. Like if you look at the reviews of this lens, it's not amazing, even though it is massive and it's overall a high quality lens. But just serving the 200 to 600 range with any degree of like super sharpness is not an easy thing to do. And then also just stabilization at that range. It has image stabilization in the lens and in the camera body.
You're not on a tripod?
Well, usually it's like resting on the railing of the deck or something like that.
No,
but
a tripod.
Even with that, like it's a significant challenge to just stabilize it. So it's certainly a challenge getting those pictures to be good, and most of it is not most of it would not be improved by like an even more expensive lens. Like that's actually not the problem here.
Might be improved by a tripod though.
Possibly, yes.
So what is her workflow? Do you know, Marco? Because if she's taking shots with the big camera constantly, she's got to have some sort of fix for this problem.
She uses her computer to like import stuff from it, but you know the first thing she usually does is take a picture with her phone of the viewfinder on the camera displaying the picture that she wants to post on Instagram and post that first because it's faster. Because otherwise, it's like, all right, well, okay, now I have to like bring the SD card to my computer, plug in the dongle, find the dongle or plug in or connect the camera with a USB-C cable, right? So like it's like then do the whole import thing, get it into Photos or whatever, or Adobe Bridge or whatever editing thing she wants to do with it.
That's right. I think she still uses Bridge. Last time I talked to her about this was a little while ago.
Yeah, I mean it's a cumbersome process, as we've just been talking about. So usually she will get it into her photo library within a day or two, but it's very different from like, oh my God, I just shot this amazing picture. I want to post this on Instagram right now or send this to somebody right now, like an iMessage. So it's, I feel like because that second step is so often like, oh my God, I just took this amazing picture. I want to do something with it on my phone right now. Usually it's showing someone, whether it's a lot of someone's through a social media thing or whether you're messaging it to, your partner or whatever, like you want to show it to someone. And it's so often that involves being on your phone so that the process of just getting the camera to give the picture to your phone somehow, usually having to involve a computer or some kind of awful app from the camera manufacturer. Like it's such a cumbersome process and nothing has ever made it better. Like nothing, like all the different, MiFi cards and direct Wi-Fi connections that the cameras have sometimes that can be controlled through their apps and everything. They're all garbage. They're all cumbersome, clunky, terrible, fragile, and slow. And believe me, I've used many of these things. They're terrible. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, I would just love if Apple just made a camera that would just upload directly to your iCloud photo library, whatever it took. That would be incredible. But the answer is they do make that. It's called the iPhone. And that's it. And if that's not what you want, or
it doesn't come with any good lenses.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's the problem. Someday maybe, that'll be like, Schiller's project on the roof is like, he's finally like getting Apple to release. Because like, I mean, look, Apple likes charging $5,000 for really boutique, expensive, high-end things. Like, look at what people like Sony or, higher end, like look at what Leica charges for their little mirrorless or fixed lens point and shoots. Like Apple could do something amazing in that market for like $2,000, $3,000. Oh my God. Like imagine what they could do. And it would have all the advantages of, being able to be integrated with your phone somehow. But I know the reality for so many reasons. I know that that's really a pipe dream. They're never going to do that. But one can dream in pipes. What is a pipe dream? Is it a dream in pipes or of pipes or containing pipes?
I don't know, actually.
I think that you got me confused by talking about it. The way it's phrased is normally it's like a dream that's not going to happen.
Yeah, but pipes happen all the time.
Oh, God, we're so sheltered. So Wikipedia for pipe dream, very, very bottom. Wild dreams induced by inhaling from an opium pipe.
Well, there you go.
Wow, we're all way too straight edge.
The main association I had is the video game, which I really loved. That was a great game. Do you remember Pipe Dream?
No.
Yeah, yes, you absolutely do remember Pipe Dream. You just don't remember the name. It's like a grid, and you get to put tiles on them that have pipes, right? And then eventually water is going to start flowing. So it's like pieces drop, and it's like, oh, I have a horizontal pipe and a vertical pipe and a T pipe and an X pipe, and you have to just put them anywhere on the board before the water starts flowing. And once the water starts flowing, you've hopefully made a pipe sequence so the water won't come out.
Oh yeah,
it's a great game.
I would have known about that before I knew about the other meaning.
The opium pipe, yes. Pipe Dream, the game, was definitely more of a factor in my childhood than an opium pipe.
I hope so. Jesus.
Speaking of games, Zephyr Zahar writes,
Good transition.
Imagine Nintendo came to Apple and asked for an M1 license for their next Nintendo Switch Pro. why would Apple refuse, and why would Nintendo not attempt this? And this is also relevant on account of the new OLED Switch having come out, which I want, if for nothing else, just because of the kickstand, which is so much nicer. But nevertheless, I don't see Apple licensing the M1 to anyone for any reason, even somebody in a different industry, because I think they think of this as their what's the opposite of an Achilles heel? Like their superpower, that this is what gives them a competitive edge and advantage over everyone else. And I don't think they would want to give that to anyone, regardless of industry.
I mean, it's not an obscure industry with Apple. 85% of Apple's profits in the App Store coming from games. Nintendo is a direct competitor. Don't give your competitor like your best hardware asset, which are these amazing CPUs that they've made for their phones, iPads, and Macs. Yeah, so obviously that's why Apple would refuse. Why would you help a competitor be better than they otherwise would be? The other reason I feel like they would refuse is Apple needs all the chips it can make for its stuff, especially now that they're using the same chips in all their stuff. And then why would Nintendo not attempt this? I mean, if Apple offered, Nintendo would be just, incredibly foolish to refuse. Apple would never offer. But Nintendo is also a very proud company and tends to not be on the bleeding edge of technology very intentionally. In the past, various people who have made very popular products. In fact, there was a good article recently about the person who made the Game Boy. Like, very intentionally make a product with established, essentially older technology that it's inexpensive to make and very reliable, and rely instead on things that don't have to do with cutting edge technology to make your games fun. Witness the Wii. Not so much the Wii U, but even the Switch, which uses an extremely old, off-the-shelf chipset, slightly modified, that is massively less powerful than its competing consoles, and yet the Switch is selling like hotcakes because the games are really good, and Nintendo had a good idea for a product, this handheld/TV thing, right? They made a good product, they made it with older technology, and Nintendo is proud of the fact that they sort of go their own way. So Nintendo would not come begging to Apple, Sony and Microsoft might, although Sony's also very proud. Microsoft would totally do it, though. But yeah, Apple's not giving this stuff to anybody. Like, yeah, who wouldn't want a chip that's incredibly low power and incredibly fast? Like, every game console maker could do amazing things with this chip, but nope, you don't get it. Only Apple does.
Yeah, and a couple other reasons, too. I mean, whatever amount of money Nintendo would make them in this deal, I don't think would be worth Apple having a customer for the chip that's not them, and therefore having to do things like make contracts to make this chip available for a certain amount of time and a certain volume, and have to then answer to this customer and deal with them, and what if there's a problem with the chip? Then Apple has to deal with that. I can't see Apple wanting to take on the burden of a customer on that level. And then secondly, whether Nintendo might not want this. Cost, I think, would be a pretty big problem. The Switch is a $300-ish, $200-ish game console. I guess I know about the new one that's $350, and I know about the little one that's $200. But suppose they would put this in like the high-end new one for $350. There aren't any M1 devices that are anywhere near that price point. I don't know what Apple pays for the M1, but
they would use an A12 and it would still be faster.
That's true. But
that's what I'm saying. Like Nintendo is not buying top of the line anything, right? So the cost wouldn't be a factor because they wouldn't be using an M1. They would be, your other point about the needs of the customer are the real difference, because what Nintendo would ask for, Apple would be like, well, we don't have anything that does that. And Nintendo would say, well, can you make something like that and sell it to us? And Apple would say no, because they don't want to have a customer, right? Yeah, Nintendo could use an M1 and that would be great, but that would be quote unquote expensive, right? Compared to the price. But like the Tegra X1, whatever they're using, probably costs Nintendo like $7. It's like it's so cheap, and the power reflects that. It is not a powerful chip, but it is designed to do game-like things. So if Nintendo went shopping in Apple's portfolio, it would have to choose from like the older Apple TV chips, essentially.
Yeah, and also, the M1 is not necessarily what Nintendo would even want. There's obviously, it's probably a larger chip than what they're using. It might have different thermal and just board space needs.
It has way more CPU power and not enough GPU power, probably, in terms of the balance.
Right, like game chips are usually lopsided in that way. They usually put as much chip real estate and budget, both for power and heat and money into the GPU as possible. And the CPU is usually okay, but like, you know, they need a lot more GPU power and not as much CPU power typically as you'd put like in a MacBook Air. And so the M1 is not even the right chip for them. But even if they did all this stuff, part of the reasons why Apple's chips are so incredibly fast for Apple is that they're Apple's chips running Apple's compiled software on Apple's operating systems. And you wouldn't have all those advantages if you just popped an Apple chip into someone else's hardware device running someone else's software with someone else's whole ecosystem. They're still, you know, fast competitive chips, but it wouldn't necessarily be as compelling even if all the other issues were worked out. It's not going to be what you think it would be by having all of a sudden Apple's chip in someone else's device.
Well, it would be pretty amazing, but like you'd be totally wasting like the image processor, the neural engine. Nintendo doesn't need those. Like that's just a waste of money, and those are a big part of the chip. Like they're powerful and significant. Nintendo would be in the situation that Apple has been like sometimes, where it's like, geez, well, the chip we're getting has this stuff on it, and we don't actually have a use for it, but I guess we could put better cameras on the Switch, or does the Switch even have a camera? I think it does, right?
No.
I didn't think so.
Anyway, the neural engine, can we use that in games somehow? Like, but they don't, this is not what they want or need, right? And yet, Apple has invested a huge amount of time and money making it, and they invest real estate on their chips and putting it there because it's incredibly important to the iPhone, which is what these chips are made for, or arguably to the Mac. But still, like, go look at any benchmark of the M1 versus the Tegra X1 that's in a Switch. It's night and day, right? So and the M1, and the thing about the M1 is it would probably also fit within a similar power envelope that would work in the Switch, given how big it is. So, the technology Apple has access to, let's put it that way. It's CPU cores, it's the manufacturing that it gets through TSMC, the preferential treatment it gets for having its chip on the newest process when other people can't get their chips, all that stuff. Anyone would love to have access to that. Secondarily, I think they would like to have access to Apple's parts bin of crappy old chips, just because those are also better than the Tegra X1 in many, many ways. But yeah, none of this is ever going to happen. I can't imagine why Apple has ever thought about it, and I can't imagine Nintendo has ever thought about it, just because that's not how the companies work. But it is fun to think about. I mean, the general disappointment over the OLED Switch is because people thought they were going to get potentially a more powerful system, they could do better stuff, and I'm kind of in the same camp of I'm always wondering, what could Nintendo do with more power, right? One example of that is Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is a game that's not possible on the N64. It's not possible on the GameCube. It's probably not possible on the Wii or Wii U class of things, although it starts to get close. But the point is, games like Breath of the Wild became possible when Nintendo finally crawled up the power curve high enough that, hey, now we can do an open world game. Power for the sake of power isn't just like, oh, I don't need fancy graphics. No, it's gameplay. You can make more interesting, better games the more computing power you have. Nintendo travels that path. They're just behind everybody else. So every time I see an amazing Nintendo game, I think, imagine what Nintendo could do with PlayStation 5 power. Imagine what they could do with Xbox Series X power. We'll find out in 7 years.
40 years.
Right. Because they'll get there eventually, but I am always looking for, I wish Nintendo would have a little bit more power. But if you look at Nintendo's balance sheet, they're saying we use incredibly cheap components that are reliable in known quantities, and we're selling every Switch that we can make. And I think they're approaching 100 million Switch sold. I think they're up to like 85, 86 million, which is close to the number of Wiis they sold. And the Wii was a standard def console in the HD age, if you remember that. So you can't really fault Nintendo's strategy, but I am always I'm always fantasizing about, imagine if the Nintendo first-party game creators had access to modern-day computing power rather than always being stuck with, 5 years ago computing power.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, ExpressVPN, Hover, and Linode. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join. We will talk to you all next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I love summer. It's not like there are parts of it that are a little, clumsy, but otherwise I love summer. It's my favorite season. I'm always happiest in summer.
Oh, speaking of summer and things you don't like and sweatiness in your Aeron chair, so this all connects in my mind. I'm sure I asked about this when we talked about Aerons in the past, but I always found the stupid bar on the front digs into my legs. Do you find that?
So it depends on how you sit. I mean, by the way, there's a reason why none of Herman Miller's chairs made after the Aeron have that bar. Like, it's not a great part of the design. It's kind of, it would be hard to get rid of with this particular design, but yeah, I agree that is a problem. Many people don't know that Aerons come in 3 different sizes. There's like an A, B, and C size, and if you have the wrong size chair for you, so like if you have one that's too big for you in particular, then that bar will dig into your legs more than it necessarily might need to. But also, it just depends on how you sit. Like whatever you're doing with your legs, if you're like crossing one and sitting on it or whatever, like that bar can get in the way.
Or sticking your legs out way in front of you, like that. Sometimes I do that, and I think that exacerbates it. Like making your legs straight essentially, so they go way out under your desk.
Yeah, I'm trying that now. It doesn't really do it for me, but yeah, I mean, it depends like how much you would squish the fabric down. So yeah, like it like any chair, it's going to be really good for most people, but some people it's going to have like a little bit of a weird fit on them, and so that's why like typically, ideally, in the good old days, we could go to stores. It was always useful to like go find a showroom for whatever brand you're looking at, or somebody that sells it, and go sit in one.
Yeah, the Aerons were everywhere as the .com bubble was popping, and I was working in the industry, so they were easy to get cheap by the crappy companies that I was working at. Weren't buying new Aerons, but as the other companies around us went out of business and they liquidated their stuff, we got a bunch of used Aerons, and they're pretty sturdy and they hold up pretty well. So they were all over the office. So I got to try all different sizes and shapes and textures of chairs, including Aerons, and that's how I learned that they were not the chair for me. Although I do appreciate the mesh thing. Although your house is air conditioned, so what do you like? Don't you keep it at a livable temperature? It's not like you're not like sweating like I am in this little unair conditioned cube here.
I mean, so we use the air conditioning when it's really hot. It's on actually right now because it's both very hot, very humid, and going to storm. So like it's obviously good for that kind of situation. But I don't, and we talked about this before. I don't like using air conditioning if I can get away without it and be somewhat comfortable. Because like I have a ceiling fan, which I love, and I would so much rather just have this fan on all day, blowing on me like at medium speed, up to about 78 to 80 degrees. Like unless it's like super humid, then maybe like a little bit lower than that. But because I don't like air conditioning, because first of all, the way air conditioning works is it's blowing like 40-degree air into the room to chill the room down.
40 degrees? How powerful is your air conditioning system?
Maybe it's,
I hope it's not blowing 40-degree air.
Well, but
you get frost.
It's blowing very cold air into a room through some ducts to try to cool the room down to a low average temperature. And it's doing this in a cycle. So the result is you have this cycle of very cold air blowing in, and then it slowly warms up, and so it's to the point where it's almost too hot. Then you have very cold air blowing in again. During that time, there's no wind. I mean, you could turn the ceiling fans on in addition, but then that, so like, there's not a lot of air movement. You're in this like isolated place where you're missing out on like the natural environment outside. You're missing out on the natural breeze and the sound of the waves and the sound of the drunk people yelling outside. Like, so I miss all that, and then I go outside and I get blasted by this super hot temperature difference. Right, and then when I get back to my house, I'm blasted by the super cold temperature difference. There is no outfit I can wear that, like, because if I'm wearing shorts, then I'm cold in the house.
Maybe you have the AC on too high or making it too cold in your house, because your house should not be like a refrigerator. You're just trying to take the humidity out.
No, but because the house is like, because when you have the AC on, you like seal the house up. You kind of have to keep it a little bit lower than you would be able to tolerate if it was open. Otherwise it gets too stuffy because then it doesn't cycle on enough. So it's a whole thing. Like I'm very glad we have air conditioning. There are times like this where it's really nice to have, and I would never go without it if I had the choice. But I try to minimize how often I actually really use it, because I like natural air. I like the breeze. I like when it's a little bit warm. I like all that. It's summer. It's supposed to be warm, and this is all things I like. So ultimately, I consider air conditioning like a necessary evil sometimes, but I'm not going to use it all the time if I can help it.
I'm assuming your house has an air-to-air heat exchanger, so you're not just recycling the same air. And I'm guessing that maybe it has a dehumidify function that doesn't change the temperature, which is a thing you can also have. Like you shouldn't be stuck in the situation that people with crappier air conditioning are, where you have to choose between freezing cold but dry and too hot. You know what I mean? Like,
as far as I know, it doesn't have a way to dehumidify. So like the systems, they're heat pump air conditioners. So like, because it's mostly air conditioning with occasional heating, and so it's regular heat pump air conditioners. And I don't think there's any mode on them that I can access that is just dehumidify.
Then maybe you don't have the heat exchanger. The heat exchanger thing is where it takes fresh air from outside and changes that air to be the temperature that you want, so you can get some fresh air in, so you're not just literally recycling the same air. And that really helps get rid of the...
We had to get something, like for modern energy codes, we had to get an ERV, which I think does that function. I'm still not entirely clear on why we needed the ERV and what exactly it does besides make noise. It's some kind of fan that is like up in like the ceiling, and I don't know what it does, but I'm pretty sure that is the goal it's trying to achieve.
Energy recovery ventilator, effective ventilation for humid climates. Yep, you definitely qualify.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, it's the air-to-air heat exchanger. It's exactly that. You can see the little diagram on the thing. It's a little diamond-shaped box with the air. Yep, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That should help things. And the air conditioning with the fan, you scoffed at that, but that is definitely a way to go. I don't know. Having spent many summers on Long Island in various rental houses, some of which had air conditioning, some of which didn't, I can tell you want the ones with air conditioning.
Oh yeah, no, that's why we put it in. It's
very hot and humid.
Yeah.
Especially at night, like not being able to sleep because it's too hot and too humid is just the worst. So I wouldn't call it a necessary evil. I would say, like, again, spend a lot of time without air conditioning and you'll never call it evil again.
Oh, no.
I get what you're saying about wanting the fresh air.
Yeah, like I won't go without it. I just don't like when I have to use it.
Yeah, you should try just putting the air conditioning on, but at a slightly lower temperature. It will still take most of the humidity out of the air. You should never feel cold in your house. I know this is a problem in the South, sorry, Casey, where the air conditioning is on, like, I always feel like there's only one setting, which is like maximum. It's like, how cold can the HVAC system in this building make it? Whatever the maximum is, just that's what I want it to be all the time, because I don't know, people are always sweaty, and it's so cold that, like, if you stay in there for a long period of time, you'll die of hypothermia. Like you in the beginning, you come in from the 98 degree, 90% humidity. You're like, it's so nice and cool in here. But you see the person working behind the counter and they've got like earmuffs on because they're like, no, you can't stay in this building for any period of time. You'll die. It's too cold for humans. That's the bad rap that air conditioning gets. And what are the worst ones? It used to be movie theaters were really guilty of that. Or I guess to save money, they have stopped that more recently. What are the other worst offenders? It's usually like smaller stores. The mall, it costs too much money to make that cold. But anything that's like, like a mattress store or something, go into like a mattress store in Georgia and it's, negative 27 degrees in there. It's no good.
It's cold in my office.
I'm so sorry. It's not cold in my office, Marco. How much sweat is on your upper lip right now? Is it non-zero? Because mine is non-zero.
I think I'm getting a blanket.
I don't like air conditioning. It's too cold.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what kind of... Only a monster, or either a monster or someone who is just impossibly spoiled would say, "Oh no, air conditioning is too much."
I get what he's saying. A lot of people don't like air conditioning, and I generally don't like it when it's too cold. But just
Well, that's the thing too. Like air conditioning takes on a whole other level when you have to share the space with other people, or other people are controlling it.
yeah, there's this disagreement about what the livable temperature for humans is. Because here's the problem: the hot people, of which I am not one in many ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think we have a lot of experience in that area on this show.
Right. It usually isn't like in the bed of like who's always cold at night and who's always hot. I'm always cold. I have bad circulation. I'm always cold. It's just the way I am, right? But the people who are hot do any amount of activity in the outdoors, like literally any amount. I took the garbage cans to the curb. Like now they're so overheated they need to be in a freezer in a meat locker for 2 hours to recover. And so that's why they always want the house to be a meat locker. It's like, you don't understand. I moved recently. And now I'm hot. Now the nuclear furnace that is my body is going to burn. And I will literally melt through the floor and journey to the center of the earth in a molten trail if I don't live in this meat locker for 2 hours to get back to normal. And then, God forbid, they move again, right?
Well, I think also like there's the problem that people have of the thermostat psychology. 2 issues, I think. Number one is like people often think that if they turn it way past where they want it to be, it'll somehow get there faster. Yeah, like it'll make it work faster, like not realizing it's just an on-off switch. But also, then there's like the thermostat battles between people where, if you're like keep adjusting it and then someone else comes up and adjusts it a different way and then you go back and adjust it again. I feel like you adjust it also in bigger swings in that context than you might necessarily want to. So like you walk up to a thermostat and it'll be set to like, 62. And you're like, what? Who would set this? Like, that makes no sense. And then someone else comes over and sets it up to like 85. And you're like, no, this is not how this thing works. But like, it's at this point, it's become a human problem much more than an HVAC problem.
Oh, the rental houses we used to have, it was always a challenge, especially when we had lots of people in like a really big rental house with like lots of extended family in one house. Inevitably, if there was, once we upgraded to houses that had air conditioning in them, which was a big upgrade, the air conditioning would work way better in one corner of this sprawling house than the other.
Yeah.
And so now you have like, okay, who gets to be comfortable tonight? Because if you set it to this temperature, these 2 rooms will be comfortable and the rest will be incredibly hot. And you set it to this temperature, they'll freeze in there, but everyone else will be comfortable. So you really just kind of have to alternate nights of like, or not alternate nights. I mean, what it boils down to usually is the old people get to be comfortable, which is a rule set that I'm becoming much happier with now that I am entering the class of the old people.
Well, it's like the best beach houses here that we rented for air conditioning were the ones where each room had its own mini split unit. Like each bedroom, because like it's houses that weren't built with central air because they're too old.
Well, that depends on who you're sleeping with, because if you're sleeping with one of the people who disagrees with you with the temperature, even a one room sort of grain size is not sufficient.
Right. Are you a like dual zone climate control in the car couple?
It's like the smoking section in restaurants. That's not a thing. I'm sorry. Like we don't have a glass wall down the middle of our car.
Oh, BS. It is absolutely a thing. You just have crappy cars.
It is not a thing. You're sitting a foot from them. It's in one interior space. It makes no. I never take it off of sync. It's always on sync. Because what the hell's the point? Like it's like literally a foot and a half away.
I understand what you're saying, but I strongly disagree. It is not flawless. It's not perfect, but it absolutely works.
Then next time you're sitting next to Aaron, why don't you strike up a cigarette and see how great this dual zone thing works for you?
Mm-hmm.